to go to Russia.
Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's Tuesday, August the 20th. We haven't been together for a few weeks, and hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to take some time to enjoy the beautiful summer that we've been afforded yet again here in Nelson. And I'd like to call the meeting to order for 4 o'clock and acknowledge the land on which we gather as the traditional territory of the Kootenay, the Syilx, and the Sinix people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. Are there any late items? I didn't receive anything from anybody. So moving on to item number 4, if we could have adoption of the agenda as circulated. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. All those in favor? And that carries. We have no additional previous minutes to adopt. So we will jump right into workshops, and we have on the line somewhere. Natalie, are you going to come forward just to stick handle or anything, or we're just going to?
I'm just here if there's any questions that I'll.
Okay, perfect. So, welcoming back to City Hall.
Thank you.
Alex Toom. Nice to see you, your smiling face again. So
good to see you all too.
Alex has been doing a little bit of work for us remotely, and for those that don't remember, Alex used to be one of our planners here in the city of Nelson. So you're here to talk about the new grant opportunities coming forward for the Housing Accelerator Fund. So over
Precisely.
to you.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm here to talk about the next round of the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation Housing Accelerator Fund application. I have a lot of slides to get through, so I'm going to go relatively quickly, and of course, if there's any questions, just interrupt me. But to get to the sort of the meat of the matter, the reason why I'm here today, we have an upcoming deadline. Program was announced not that many weeks ago. The deadline to apply is on September 13th. So I'm working now. I'm working part-time, but I'm working entirely on this application. The two things that we need validation from council for before we forward the application is, for one, confirmation to put the time that it's going to take to do this application properly, which in reality, as you're aware, we're rather short-staffed in development services. That's going to mean putting off the official community plan by a few weeks. Won't be able to work on it until after September 13th when this application is done, if council agrees to devote our staff time to working on this application. And secondly, we're primarily here then, if you agree to allow us to work on this application, to talk about our staff's proposal for the initiatives that we're going to submit, so the action items. The reason why this is really important is they're important action items, and we're talking about a multi-million-dollar grant. But more specifically, if the city is awarded the grant this time around, we're going to have to come back to you to get a formal resolution approving these 7 action items that I'm going to be proposing before we get the grant money. So it's important that we have your, it's sort of high level. We're not getting into the details even in the application itself, but that we're all sort of on the same page about what we're going to be proposing, so that we're proposing an application that we're actually going to be able to accept if granted. So just a quick reminder of what HAF is, the Housing Accelerator Fund. Federal government through CMHC is trying to remove barriers for housing. They want to have diversity of housing. They want to help support non-market housing. The two big things about what the program is about is making housing happen fast. The way that funding is allocated is based on the number of units that we think we can produce with the funding within 2 years. It's really about speed. And I'll highlight number 4 too, that they're also looking for us to make high impact and systemic changes. So it's not about, it's about building housing, but what they really want us to do is changing our processes and land use regulations, to be frank about it, in order to have systemic, long-term repercussions, benefits for housing long beyond the timeline of this program. Generally, what they're looking for with this program, it's about housing, but it's also about supporting policies and providing money to municipalities to help support the development of complete communities, walkable communities, low carbon and climate resilient communities. So the housing bit is obviously central, but in fact, it's only just one of the 3 objectives of the program. So just to remind you where we're at, we applied for in round 1 a year ago. That application was denied. We have a deadline in a few weeks' time. They're looking at signing all of the agreements that are awarded for round 2 by the end of this calendar year. And then there's 3 years to basically implement the action items, and there's 4 years of funding. A quick comparison in what's different this time around. Last time this time around, I'll say there's only 10% of the initial funding. A year ago it was $4 billion, now it's $400 million. The good thing, and so it sounds bad when you put it like that, the good thing, let's say, is that the only municipalities that are eligible to apply are those that did apply the first time around, which includes Nelson, and those that weren't accepted first time around, which includes Nelson. And what our CMHC representative highlighted too, sort of in our favor potentially, is that most of the big cities, they got their funding the first time around. So they get, a lion's share of that $4 billion last year. They're not eligible to reapply. There's a lot of the smaller municipalities that whose applications were denied. So a lot were denied. There was a ton of applications last time, but where a lot of smaller municipalities now continue to get this money. So it's a bit of a close competition. Yes.
Alex, I'm just going to interrupt periodically for questions from councils. Jesse, Councillor Woodward has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Alex. Basic question, why were we denied?
I'm going to get to that in, I think, 3 or 4 slides.
Okay, thank you.
I have the answers, yeah.
Councillor Payne.
I'll just jump in and say, ask how many are eligible then, Alex? How many people were in that pot that are eligible to apply again in this round? Do you know?
That number I don't have,
okay.
Unfortunately.
No worries.
Is there any other questions? I can't.
That's it for right now. I know you can't see the hands, so no, I'm good. We're golden. Keep going.
So this part took me, I wasn't, maybe you already have your heads around it. I wasn't here last year for this, but it took me a few days to get my head around it. And our CMHC representative told me that it was the same thing for all of their staff too. It's a really different kind of grant application. Usually a grant, say you're going to build a hospital or a school, you apply, say, for a grant, we're going to use this money to build a hospital, you get the money, spend the money on that. This is really different because the application and the initiatives that we're proposing are sort of dissociated from the expenses. So the funding is kind of like it's an incentive. They want us to do certain things that are more policy things, that a lot of which don't actually cost money. Staff time, yes, but not a lot of money. And if we do these things, those systemic changes I was talking about, they will give us a lot of money, which we can spend on a fairly wide variety of things, which I'll detail shortly. The other benefit this time around too is that they've basically given us a cheat sheet of what to apply for. So based on the successful round 1 applications, they've published the half 10 best practices list. And frankly, they're basically telling us what we should say, what we should put in the application, and saying this is what worked last time, so you should just do this. So there's things that need to be adapted for each context, of course, and there's a lot of those things actually that Nelson has already implemented, but that cheat sheet is there, and obviously we're working with that. As I said, there's the initiatives that we're proposing, which I'll provide that proposal in a few minutes, and then the money that we could expect, if successful, we could probably expect around $5 million, and we're able to spend that on any costs associated with implementing those initiatives. We can spend on housing, we can spend it on infrastructure, as long as that infrastructure supports housing, quote unquote. So water, wastewater, stormwater, roads, transit, sidewalks, all of this stuff that's on the slide here are eligible expenses as long as there's that link with housing and building complete communities and having the infrastructure to support those. So, what to answer Councillor Woodward's question, we were told in the feedback from our first round application, it was a good application. As I said, there were, I don't know if every municipality, but a lot of, vast majority, it seems, of local governments across Canada applied. They were inundated with applications, particularly from big cities as well, too, that probably had staff of, 10, 15 people working full time on their application. A lot of smaller municipalities weren't successful. So the first reason is that there were too many people trying to get the funding. More specifically on our application, the reason why, sorry, your question? Okay, the reason why we weren't on the top of the list to get the funding is that the initiatives that were proposed weren't building housing as fast as other municipalities. So the initiatives that they're looking to maximize the number of units that are going to be built in 2 years' time. So actually, a lot of our initiatives, 1, 2, and 3 here, the fee waiver program, connection fees, very quick fixes like that, they got the full score, 20 out of 20, which is great. The one initiative that had the worst score was the creation of a housing corporation. They say it's a great policy, it's a great action, but it's too slow. They want housing in the next 2 years. So that didn't cut it for that.
Councillor Woodward has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand they want speed here, but I think one of the main problems with Nelson is we're very far away. We have a hard time getting supplies and workers and developers, and our development services is overloaded. So I'm a little concerned yes, we could fill this out, we get the money, but what really has changed for us?
I think, sorry?
Since the last time we applied, we still have all these limitations.
To be clear, when they say having a maximum number of units that in the next 2 years, it's the number of units permitted. So it's based on building permits issued. So the supply line issues aren't directly involved with that. So by the program deadline of December 1st, 2027, that's our timeline for the number of units for which we'd have issued building permits.
And sorry, can I have a supplemental, please? Sure. Thank you. And what if we don't complete on time?
If we don't complete on time, it's actually not that bad. In the sense that the only money that we'd be risking not getting is the final payment of 25%. So I was also in the feedback that I got, they said, number 2 here on the slide, housing projections were too optimistic, which meant, in their opinion, it's a matter of opinion, we asked for too much money. It seems like $5 million instead of $6 million is something, formerly I'm told, that would be more realistic projection. I've done the preliminary projections. I do think it's quite realistic based on the speed things are going at currently, and the Bill 44 changes, etc. I think the projections that we need to submit in order to apply for $5 million are quite realistic, and not as more conservative, much more conservative perhaps than last time. So those are sort of the differences, I would say.
Thank you, Alex.
We're good.
All right. So these are, I'll go, there's a slide for each of these initiatives, but I wanted to first give you the overview of what these are. So some of these are from the previous application. Some of these are based on that 10 best practices list that I mentioned. Basically, the idea is that they're pushing us to do. So there's not a lot of original content in it. Some things that are sort of spun based on reality of where Nelson is at. As I said, we've already implemented a lot of those 10 best practices. So there's some creativity there, but it's really largely catering to what the program is suggesting that we do in order to get this funding, which would be quite important. for advancing infrastructure and housing supply in Nelson. So the action item, so proposal number 1. So these are regulatory changes. So as I said, these aren't things that we'd be spending money on, but these are things that they are asking councils and municipalities to say that to commit to doing in exchange for the funding. So these are the best practices that they are suggesting that we do, that you as council commit to adopting, say in the next 1 to 2 years, if the funding is granted. So currently we require development permits, for example, for 3 and 4plexes. We're removing that requirement. They strongly suggest that municipalities increase height to 4 stories near, that's the word that they use, so it's open to interpretation, post-secondary campuses. There's expanding, it's broad, there's a lot of ways to interpret it, but expanding mixed use and commercial neighborhood uses in the neighborhoods, and requiring that all new single detached homes be suite ready. So not necessarily have the suite. This is already a requirement we have in the R3 zone. You can't build, for the last 10 years, I'd say, you can't build a new single detached home in the R3 zone in Nelson that isn't suite ready at least. So the idea here would be to expand that to R1 essentially. Number 2, prioritizing affordable market housing. Action letter A would be adopting a policy saying that staff and in development services, we would be fast tracking those applications. B is a heavier one. This is a best practice that they strongly suggest, modeled off of Squamish's application, which is to allow, as a right, 5-story affordable housing, long-term secured affordable housing across the city with very few restrictions on the restriction of density, siting, or lot coverage. So basically pre-zoning the whole city for that if it is affordable, secured, long-term non-market housing. Number 3, to have a grant program to support affordable housing. So this is sort of the difference, perhaps, where a key difference between this application, this proposal, and last round application. Last round application, there was some spending on waiving fees for affordable housing, but a big ticket action item was that housing entity, which they deemed too slow. It would be hard to get a corporation up and running and already having issued building permits in 2 years. So this is instead quickly implementing a grant program using the half funding. To be 100% funded by half, 0% by city reserves. And there's various ways of looking at it, but in order to also speak to the other objectives of the program, it would also be, taking into account low carbon climate building criteria.
Question from Councillor Page.
Can we riff off that for a second?
Mm-hmm.
So, what could be interesting about this one is, scaring Janice right now, is framing this as seeding such a grant funding, and perhaps like we've done with our permissive tax exemptions on affordable units through that policy, then taking the property taxes captured on those new units and redirecting it back into the same grant program that was fed to start those units, so that there's a perpetuity and a systematic change that goes along with it. So we get this jump start, but then this program has sustainability over the long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I can be totally part of it. Mm-hmm.
Well, you would take the units that are then developed, and you would say, well, because you came through this program, we're going to take the property tax we now have, that we're now gaining on the system because of the new units, and we're putting that back in to replenish the program.
So you're saying new house, the property tax that house pays goes into a housing program as opposed to
even a portion of it
taxation that pays for the fact that there's sewer and plumbing and other facilities that runs to the door of the house?
I think you work out a formula, right? You think about it and you look at what was used to seed it, and you could think about Are we replenishing what we took? Are we replenishing +2? Is there a timeline? You're just saying we now have this additional tax revenue and this program does make sense. So let's
Oh, don't use
keep
the word
filling the
additional,
tank.
it's tax revenue. It wouldn't be additional tax revenue, but did I capture that right? Councillor Page?
It's new units.
New units, tax goes somewhere else.
Not all, like, it doesn't have to, it's not in perpetuity, it's not always, but an apportionment of it.
Just wanted to understand the concept, so.
Yeah, and just to build on that, new units aren't sort of 100% of the tax revenue from new units doesn't go to pay for the service of the new units. There is sort of a marginal cost that they're contributing to. It's not like for every new unit we have to hire new staff. No, they're buying into a system. So that's why we encourage new development, because it's starting to reduce the share of sort of fixed costs like operations. They're like, oh, now you're contributing to operations. So there is a benefit to the other taxpayers for new units to contribute to the tax base. And so there's a percentage there. It's kind of a bonus. It's almost like it reduces the overall tax burden. And I think that's what Councillor Page is referring to.
Tap into that.
Whatever that formula is, that feeds back into the fund, or maybe a portion of that feeds back into the fund. So the overall taxpayers still get a benefit from new units being built, but then the next units, we continue the cycle of creating a diverse housing stock.
Can I
I
just,
like it.
I think there's a couple things. One, if, that's assuming infill, right? That we don't have new roads, new sidewalks,
Sure.
new
Yeah.
boulevards,
that's fair.
new whatever. So it'd have to be infill.
Yeah.
And second, there is, I think you'll see in Alex's presentation there, there is pressure with new development, right? More people in parks, more people hear everything. So yeah, definitely a balance there.
Balance. Yep.
I don't know if we've ever done a study to see what that kind of impact is. That might be interesting. And I guess my question for Alex, any sense from the program folks, if we created something like that where we're, would they look at that favorably, or would they go, you're taking our money and using it in a different way? To me, it seems like it would meet their long-term goals, but I'm not sure if that discussion happened or whether we'd want to put it in application. Does that complicate it and throw another variable in there? That could be policy work. Maybe it's policy work as opposed to identifying up front, just maybe some sense of that.
It would, the grant application part is, creating a grant program is certainly part of what they're recommending the municipalities do with the funding. Building on it, is they said they're looking for those systemic policy changes as well too, that will go beyond this funding and beyond the life of the program. So I think that would be looked upon favorably if there was a way of using this funding to sort of spur a seed funding program that would have more impact in the future as well too.
Yeah, because the other one
That could be discussed with your representative.
Because the other one we talked about is really doing the same thing with infrastructure. We had upfront, some of those infrastructure costs and recoup those over time, so we could create this ability to, fund future projects and, those
Income agreement.
bigger upfront costs. Because I think that's one of the things we're definitely seeing is these new developments, they're really hard to make on a rental basis because of, the millions you have to pay for roads, servicing, et cetera. And if we could create a fund where we would be the patient investor, we would put that money up front and recoup it from, the units over time. And then that fund could go into the next project.
So that was my riff of taking this idea and giving it, legs for years and years to come by replenishing its fund over time.
Maybe just as a follow-up, so in terms of, so that's really what we, as you said, mentioned, we did with the permissive on some of these other projects. So if it's affordable housing, it's likely eligible for permissive. So we'd really carry on that same policy instead of giving a permissive. we would
Do this.
tax them and
Keeps them out
put
of
it
that
into
bucket,
the
yeah.
funding, yeah.
Yep. It would be that stuff like that.
Yeah, I can discuss that idea with our CMHC representative before submitting the application.
Thank you.
No other
Good to go?
questions? Yep, keep going.
All right. I have less than 10 minutes with you, so I'm going to go relatively quickly to the final ones. Fee waiver as well for secondary suites as well too, and laneway houses. It's on the next slide. Sorry. Yes, exempting secondary suites from water line upgrades. When they're being added to a house that already has an existing house and that has an existing water line as well too. Increasing the minimum water service size as well too, in order to basically future-proof future development, so that the infrastructure is in place to accommodate more units. This is the fee waiver program as well too for secondary suites. So for the first year, someone applies, they don't have to pay for anything, even water and waste collection fees, which minimum would give them $1,000 of savings. They also encourage us in their best practices to work on future-ready infrastructure planning and reviewing our development fees and charges around servicing, so it's infrastructure planning essentially in order to accommodate infill. Item C here is specifically then exempting future affordable housing projects from application and servicing fees when certain criteria are met. Second last one. This was already proposed last time too, making municipal lands available for affordable housing. So committing to, they want us to say really targeted and realistic with their goals. So committing to identify, prepare, lease out at least one site within 2 years for affordable housing development that belongs to the city, and then to afterwards establish processes and policies to sort of formalize that and create that systemic change in the future. The final one here is streamlining permitting, and what they're pushing is what a lot of municipalities are turning to is e-permitting platforms rather than the paper application forms that we currently have in development services. So this is one of the items other than the grant program, which is a multi-million-dollar program. This is basically one of the other few that would cost money, but that money would be covered for the first 4 years at least by the grant, 100% of it. So implementing off-the-shelf permitting software for all of our applications. So if we, we're able to expect around $5 million.
Can you Alex, just hang on just a second before you do budget. Councillor Payne has a question.
Alex, in light of the incredible pressure we feel around getting and retaining planning staff, do you think the e-permitting would save money and reduce our need for, save our resources, our human resources by directing the permitting that way? So is that sort of a trade-off of the cost of it going over time if we have the money to invest now from the grant? So we'll sort of actually save money in the long run. Does that make sense?
Quite possibly. It'll depend on how applications grow over the next 4 years as well too. Like we'd have 4 years of funding in order to cover all of those costs as well as any staff time. They're very, very flexible about how the money is spent. So we'd have 4 years to see how it goes and see where how that impacts staff time. But the idea of e-permitting is certainly to make things more efficient, time effective, both for applicants and for staff. So the idea is that things will go quicker. There's always learning curves, but after 4 years, we have a pretty good understanding and use of the software, and applications will probably continue to increase as well too. So it's hard to say, but we should be more efficient with that kind of software.
Councillor Page has a question.
First off, are you having a hard stop at 4:30? Am I keeping you from something if I ask, or are we?
No,
okay.
it's you.
we got the 1:45 stuff coming up, so I think we can bleed into it a tiny bit if the chair allows. On the water line upgrades, number 4, Similar comment to number 3, that given the value that we've been told by the province to upgrade the by right across the board, and that now to enable that, we need our water lines to be at 1 inch in order to achieve that practically, then it makes sense to seed fund to be able to turn over those improvements on individual lot bases. But it also, I think, gives a systemic angle to it if we look at our water fee rates at what it would take over the execution of that to replenish that seed funding, so that when we get past the initial hump, this water fee that we collect universally covers the 1 or 2 additional instances, well, the dozens that will happen every few years to also turn over as other people go through their evaluations of doing projects. But then in continuity, we are like, yes, we will do upgrades to up to 10,000 or 5,000, whatever the parameters of the program are. But to add that angle of how we then look at our fees on the other side of that program to then funnel or fund future 1 inch upgrades to properties and get the stock to where we can achieve those units.
Thank you,
Yeah, so
Councillor
this
Page.
infrastructure, all of this, the infrastructure items you're talking about, sort of falls under the infrastructure planning that they're encouraging us to do here,
Okay.
of getting the city ready, spending money on consultants if necessary, preparing plans to get the city sort of, get the pipes in to be ready to more efficiently accommodate infill rather than doing that on a piecemeal project by project basis. So exactly that.
Well, I'm not talking on a neighborhood level though. Like I'm talking about.
But the planning, the planning to sort of understand what we need to do.
Okay, trust that.
Continue. So, question, Councillor Tate.
I need to understand the grant part of it. It's like money, we get a pot of money and it's from us to the whomever, the builder, whatever, but back to us what we normally would have charged them. That's how a grant works.
Some portions of this work like that, I think.
That's okay. I think I'm understanding it. Thank you.
Keep going. I think
So
we're on
this
to,
is sort of a-
there we go, budget.
Yeah, sort of a sample budget of how the money could be distributed. There's I showed you the list of all of the eligible expenses. They're very flexible, and again, we don't have to tie each dollar spent to the 7 initiatives I just presented. Those are the things that we'd be committing to doing and implementing in 2 years' time, within the next 2 years, ideally much faster. And in exchange, we'd have money to spend on affordable housing. So, the grant program would be covered under the second item here. That's the biggest budget item here. The $750,000 that would include. So it's an estimate based on for covering infrastructure planning, consultants, etc., as well as the permitting software for the first 4 years, the implementation, all of that. And also able to take advantage of this grant to fund some active transportation infrastructure as well too, which can be harder to find grant money for some of those items at times. So, and there would still be quite a bit of money available for infrastructure capital expenses to work on that future ready bit. So, that's my presentation. I don't have very much time left, but.
I've got a
looking back to
question,
the
sorry,
questions.
before you get to the questions that we have to answer here. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. Alex, are you concerned at all about, this seems to be all about speed, and that's not something I equate much with city governance. So I'm a little concerned about going from our regular methodical movement forward, getting things done, but at a very, not a slow pace, but a pace where we can see mistakes coming at us before we make them. Are you a little concerned about us moving really quickly on things and making mistakes?
It's a good question. Obviously that time, that's the biggest, the most important, piece in this application. That was stressed again, when they got the feedback on the round 1 application. So these initiatives are, they're conceived with that in mind, that they're mostly policy changes that we could turn around relatively quickly to be able to bring that to council over the course of 2025. And if council is prepared to adopt those those zoning changes, policy changes as mentioned, I think I'm confident that those would lead to housing permits within 36 months of those coming forward. So again, just a permit being issued. So not worry about that. The grant program needs to get going relatively quickly, but it's not a complicated program to put in place because it's not a separate corporation. It's about getting a call for applications out relatively quickly, and stressing the point that the money is also tied to them getting their project together relatively quickly as well too. But because it's a fund of $2 million that we could establish with this program, I think the incentive would be there for applicants to move quickly to receive that. So no, I wouldn't be concerned about these items. I think they are things we can do relatively quickly, and then it's hoping that there's uptake on it. And again, when I asked that question too to the CMHC representative, and that's why she said, the worst case, even if you've got 0 new units built in 2 years, the worst case is you're not going to get the final 25% payment, because they're fully aware that local governments, councils can only do so much. We can put those, lay the groundwork, but we don't have control over everything and what people actually do and apply for in market conditions. So as long as our plan is solid, and we would have our application reviewed by CMHC staff before sending it, we're for sure going to get 75% of the funding if the application is approved, and then the 25% would be contingent on how well we do.
Thank you, Alex.
Can I just maybe give sort of a order of, or just some context? So for example, the new project, the BC Builds project that the Chamber has proposed, we're looking at over $1 million or 1.2 million for infrastructure improvements for that project alone. That's extending Baker Street, that's sidewalks, that's water, sewer, storm, etc. So this, in context, that's 55 units is 1.2 million. So that has been definitely a barrier to, those rental properties happening. And, I think we're, the proposal for the golf course lands, they're also pushing back at, the upfront costs. So we're seeing, that as, one of the larger barriers. So anyway, I just wanted to give be able to spend, this is one, 2 or 3 larger projects, this isn't multiple projects. This is a few projects to, spend that type of money. The project that we do have, the lands that we do control are the endowment lands up at the college that we've identified those area for improvement. So I think we'd want to, that's our most direct ability to influence the amount of housing that could happen. And so again, we spent a fair amount of money on infrastructure costs when we upgraded for the Nelson Health Campus. We upgraded some of that infrastructure to do that. So like I said, I think on an order of magnitude, we're not talking multiple large projects.
I have a couple questions, so if council doesn't mind if I jump in. So I just, based on just what the city manager said, Alex, perhaps you can give me some clarity. So, or anybody else that wants to jump in, this development cost of BC Builds at 1.2 million or somewhere in that neighborhood. I understand those. I understand that is sort of falls within this non-market housing, rental housing that's being pushed for. I just want to have clarity on the fact that if we were to get this $5 million, we're not using it to offset the cost of golf course development, are we? Where those are what I consider market homes. This is about non-market housing. We wouldn't be using this grant money for market development. Can somebody answer that?
Well, I think they do say that
It's
missing middle
across the
housing.
spectrum.
So it wouldn't
Everybody.
be upper end, but
Yeah, so I guess it would depend on exactly what they build.
Yeah, so
Sounds like they're building more of a resort there. I don't consider that the missing
No,
middle.
no.
I mean, I want to see it develop,
So
but I don't consider that the missing middle.
the initiative number 3, that grant program, so spending, say $2 million of the funding on creating a grant out, that would be specifically for affordable housing. However, the other pieces, for example, 5, that's around infrastructure. That's really about all housing, and it's not just about affordable housing. It's about putting in the groundwork and getting the city ready to accommodate all kinds of missing middle housing, all kinds of people housing.
Thank you. I have another question, and it has to do with when we get to, if we want to go back to your questions, and it goes back to, my heart sort of sinks when I look at 1B and where we are talking about no density requirements, sitting or lot coverage restrictions. I sometimes wonder where drainage is going in this town. Are we just is everything gonna be just going into storm? Where is green space around projects? As we continue to densify in the city of Nelson, we can't invent a new park. We don't have land for that. And I get a bit uncomfortable, although I know it's not gonna happen everywhere, but that gives me pause when I see that. And I'm just wondering how much weight is in there when we get rid of everything so we can build wall to wall and shake hands with our neighbors through the bathroom windows. What that looks like in terms of the environment and the sustainability of our town, in terms of heat sink and all the things I hear council members talk about regularly in terms of climate adaptation and stuff. I'm just a bit concerned when you leave no breathing space around a house and you've got that heat pump that generates heat that's on the outside of the wall that's blowing at the next door neighbor's house. I mean, I have some concerns. How heavily is that in their suggestions of what we do?
Would they call it eliminating exclusionary zoning? It is pretty heavy in their suggestions. Again, we don't have to do everything, and it's important that council be comfortable with the initiatives that are being proposed. I can't answer all of the questions about the future and where the water is going to go, except to, sort of as you alluded to yourself, Mayor Morrison. Like, there's unlikely to be a lot of these types of applications for 100% affordable housing unit developments around the city. But this is the proposal that they sort of, nudged us, that based on Squamish's example, but we can also meet them in the middle somewhere as well too, if that's where you're more comfortable with. So Squamish went with no siting, no lot coverage restrictions, no setbacks. But we could say none of that except for lot coverage. We're still going to make you respect lot coverage.
Right. Yeah, it's just a concern. I'm sorry. I mean, it may or may not happen, but this is what you're telling me, is that most of these things are sort of regulation or zoning or something that we have to change, which staff can do it, that we can get it back so we can get the application in. So I just look at that as something that, yes, that's work that can be done to change our bylaws, and it could come back to us in quick order to get this application in. But it's about what that particular one, in my mind, might look like. I've got Councillor Tate, and then I believe I have Councillor Page, and I have, and Payne. Sorry, Councillor Payne, so I'll go Tate, Payne.
Thanks very much. I had flagged 2B as well. I think that the no lot coverage restrictions could be really challenging with snow removal, but also the fact that folks have bear bins outside, and not every street has a boulevard for snow removal, and people want places to put their kiddie pools and that sort of stuff, like literally toddler pools. So I had flagged that because I'm not entirely sure, like, do we have to say yes to all of these for you to send it in? And some of them I'm a little bit curious about. And then the other one that I was curious about on second reading was the 1D, require that all new single detached homes be suite ready. And I have a curiosity about that because I know that there's a movement towards smaller homes. And so if you're only building an 850 square foot home, does it have to be suite ready? I just had a curiosity about that. If we have these things in the proposal, does that mean we must have to do them, even if, like, in this half hour, we're like, oh yeah, that sounds good. And then a year from now, we're like, whoa, pump the brakes. I didn't think of this scenario. So I was curious about like how the proposal lands if you get approved, and also just about softening some of the language so that there's a little bit of wiggle room for different scenarios. Thanks.
All right, I'll start with the last part of your question first, because a lot of local governments kind of ask that too. How much, because we're not asking for a resolution at this time. How much are you committing to with the application?
Right.
They are a little ambiguous about that. I think there's certainly a lot of goodwill, and assuming there's no extenuating circumstances, that council is sort of committing to adopting these things, and if it's unclear if one or two or three of the action items weren't ultimately adopted, how that would jeopardize the funding, and maybe they would ask for a counter proposal. That's not entirely clear. If there's a lot of things that you want to talk about here, it would be possible as well too for me to come back at the September council meeting if that was a priority for you, a few days before the application deadline, to kind of hone in some of these key things you're talking about. For 2B, based on what I'm hearing from you already, I think it would be totally fair in our application to strike the lot coverage bit. I think based on your concerns, and they're totally legitimate, I think that would be the safest thing to do for now. And it would still be a huge plus and a huge action item that could have a lot of importance. But I'm hearing on the lot coverage, I think that makes sense. On the suite ready bit, I think that's a really valid comment as well too, around smaller homes. The thing that comes to mind then is, then to set a threshold, which is, if you put in thresholds, are always a bit arbitrary, but it could be generous about it. I'm just throwing out numbers like that off the top of my head, but say any home above 1,200 square feet, for example, has to be suite ready, or 1,500 square feet, something like that. We could consider that kind of threshold and include it in high level language, that caveat in the application, and then hash out what that threshold is next year.
Thank you. Councillor Payne, you have a question.
I'm just interested in this application for $5 million. Alex, how many units is that? There's a unit calculation, isn't there?
Yeah. So that's we calculate our baseline based on the last 5 years, sort of building permits, and then what this funding would incentivize, and that's based on 130 units incentivized based on having to have funding and these half initiatives, these 7 initiatives, over by December 1st, 2027. The building permits issued for 130 additional units. So based on some of the more quantitative initiatives in here, for example, a grant application that's offering actually quite significant money for say up to 50 units. That's already 50 units out of 130. Then making municipal lands at at least one municipal site available for affordable housing projects. Let's say we're talking about a 20 to 30 unit development. That's that already. The fee waiver for 50 for 1 year for 50 secondary suite and laneway house applications. That's another 50 units as well too. So I think it's a pretty conservative number based on these action items.
Supplemental?
Yes.
I think it's a pretty conservative number as well, considering the fact that we currently are working with 3 different organizations that would fit into this category, right? Because they won't have building permits until we have... Exactly. Yeah, so we sort of have them, not anything is guaranteed, I understand that. Sounds like the BC Builds one is pretty good. But we do have those in the work, so I think I agree with you that 130 units is pretty fair and reasonable. And I think the other thing that Sebastian and I in discussion around the first round of application was the fact that they're going to give you the first 3 installments based on your intentions to move forward with these. And if it doesn't happen that you achieve the goals, you just don't get the fourth one. There's no clawback, there's no slap on the wrist. You know, there may be a little disappointment from all of us, but I think it's, you know, as you started your discussion with saying, this is a very unusual and systemic change of how CMHC is distributing money, and it is across the housing spectrum, but the focus, I think, for us would be non-market housing. So there's certainly a few wrinkles that I think we can work out as we move forward. I'm 100% with the mayor on the lot coverage, and we have those thoughts around not only where does the water go, but water supply. So these are concerns that we, as a very thoughtful and judicious council, will bring forward. But the grant itself, especially with the work you've done so far with CMHC, I think it's an incredible opportunity for the city of Nelson.
Councillor Page.
Just quickly, so mentioned earlier, we may not understand how many people had applied, how many applications had gone in. I did look up the numbers. There were 544 applications, 179 were successful, leaving 365 other applicants in the pool. And so basically if half of them put something in, there's about $2 million per application. And I think there's some parameters around population, but it seems like a pretty good pool to be in. Some conservative assumptions.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I think a lot of the municipalities are quite smaller than Nelson as well too. So.
Okay, any further questions? So we're down to kind of the, kind of what we just need to do. So do we need to have a resolution, or do we just need to have sort of the straw poll consensus around the table to continue on with this work, and that we can tolerate a delay of the OCP for, I mean, well, it's two sort of separate things. The OCP for a month. Councillor Woodward.
Would there be some kind of provincial government slap on the wrist for a late OCP? No.
We have until December 2025 to adopt a new OCP. So, even taking this sort of hiatus from the OCP would be, you know, our timeline would be at this point, you know, given the staffing issues as well too in development services, that certainly hasn't helped. But you know, March next year, so still well in advance of the potential deadline.
Okay, thank you.
I see no other questions here. So Alex, just do you have what you need? Is there something formal, Sarah? Is there something formal that we need to give? It would be that you're going to continue to work where you actually make the hard decisions when you come back with the required bylaw, zoning, and other ancillary changes. I guess that would be the next thing we'd see you back with. Do I understand that correctly?
Exactly. Unless you want me to come back based on if there's other things that you feel we haven't got detail with, so I've noted what's been flagged for change on lot coverage and the suite ready bit, etc. So and other comments as well too. So I can work with that and work on the application. If you would like, if you think it's important, I could come back for the September meeting, which is in just a few days before the application deadline. It's my end, it's not necessary. It would be for you if you want to go through this in more detail. If not, the next step would be preparing it as staff, submitting it, and if money is granted, we would come back after that announcement to council, say maybe November, December, if CMHC is on time, and asking for a resolution, so committing to those items, you know. Engagement basically, but not a bylaw change that time, but just a general resolution committing to implementing this application before we would sign off and actually get the funding.
So just for clarification, you're not coming back to the September meeting with these changes that are part of our proposal for the money. You're not coming back with that in September. This is just to give you the nod to continue this work, and we would see the changes come after the fact. You're not having to take these. You're not having to prove that we've done any of these steps beforehand. Councillor
It's
Tate
just,
has,
it's just that commitment.
okay, Councillor Tate has a question.
I'm sorry. So on the example budget page, that infrastructure capital expenses, to me, that's not captured in any of the initiatives. Am I misunderstanding it?
You're correct. It's not captured in the initiatives,
Okay.
and they don't have to be. So
Love it.
to take a more extreme example, you can have 7 initiatives that are purely just bylaw changes, regulatory changes that just cost staff time, and you could spend hypothetically all of that money, on a grant program for affordable housing, on infrastructure, on sidewalks. It's pretty dissociated, actually.
Oh, that's what you
Very
mean by
flexible.
dissociated, because
Doesn't
some of the
matter.
things don't actually cost money, like very much money, it just costs our
Exactly.
fabulous
Yeah.
time. Gotcha. Okay, I'm understanding
It took me 2
it.
days to get my head around it. I was very confused too. So yeah,
Thank you.
it's different. It's a special program.
Okay, so council, is there consensus that we want to continue to move forward with pursuing this grant for $5 million? Get the zeros right, so.
The zeros, right?
$5 million, the half a grant, so. I'm looking like, okay, I'm getting thumbs and fingers, yeah.
You don't have to, that's just like a direction
Yeah,
to
yeah, it's a
staff.
direction, but I mean, it's good to know that, more than one person that's going in that direction. Okay, so there you go, you got the thumbs up to continue, team, to.
Thank you, Alex.
Do this work. I don't know, I kind of sometimes wonder if kind of wish that we'd said no, and then people could take a sigh of relief for a second. But back to the grindstone. And to get
That's
this
good.
work done. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Great work,
you
Alex.
very much.
Thank you.
Nice to
Thank
see
you.
you.
And I don't think you have to drop in before September. I think we'll be okay.
Okay. Sounds
Okay,
good.
just send us the note that we got the money. That's what we're looking for now.
But feel welcome
Whether
to
we have
come
money or not, I send you a note.
Yeah, but you can drop it as Councillor Wood Payne says. You can drop in anytime you like. You're always welcome.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Okay, and now our next staff report is in order to provide council with an overview of where the city is financially as compared to budget. The Q2 financial update is being presented, and the attached financial report and presentation presents the current actual and budgeted financial figures as of June 30th, 2024 for the current year, with comparative figures for the same period of the prior year. The report presents the revenue and expenses under the same headings as the statement of operations in the annual audited financial statements. The presentation is prepared to highlight the key variances and provide an update on capital projects. So we have both Chris Jury and Amy with us today to run us through the Q2 and answer any questions.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Gonna let our Deputy CFO, Amy Mooney, kind of take us through the presentation. I may jump in with a few items and things that I think of our importance, but kind of go from there.
I don't get the important ones.
No, that things that maybe are
I'm just
No.
kidding.
on
All
the
right.
side.
So I know we're starting a little bit late, so we'll get us back on track. We'll touch base on some operating revenue, expenses, and then Chris will dive into some of the major capital projects we've got going on. We're not going to comment on every single line item because you had that in your agenda package beforehand, but no. So starting with the operating revenue, when we're comparing to prior year and the current year budget, you'll notice conditional grants in 2023 include the $4.2 million from the Growing Communities Grant, so we do expect to see a decrease from prior year at the Q2 mark. It's also trending well below budget currently, and that's due to those major capital projects that are included in that budget, for example, the Civic and G911. So at the end of the year, when we determine kind of the percentage of completion, we'll record that revenue, so that should bump it up more in line. Nelson Hydro sales have increased from prior year, primarily due to the rate increase and projected to come slightly under budget, though it's very dependent on the winter season coming up. Now, when we look at it on a percentage of the budget, if everything was linear, we would expect things to be 50%, though utilities and taxes we bill in the first quarter, so those are showing at a bit higher of an amount. In sale of service, this is trending slightly below budget due to the URSU revenue is a little bit lower, and also just due to timing of payment of the RDCK fire protection that was received after the Q2 cutoff. On the flip side, in sale of service, we've seen an increase in our garbage fees, up 27% as projected, and as well an increase in parking meter revenues are up 18%.
Maybe if I can just jump in on the couple of those things. So the fire protection is an agreement we have for Area E and the RDCK. We're negotiating with them right now on what that agreement's going to look like for 2025, and come up with a model that I think works a little bit cleaner, where we look at our overall budget and allocate a portion of that based on assessed values, very similar to how we do with other services that I think is a bit more black and white, as opposed to, coming up with, numbers and inflationary increases and that sort of thing. So we're both, responsible for the budget going forward. So that's something we're kind of building on. Yeah, I think on the flip side, I think in that sale of services piece, I don't know if we're going to talk a little bit about parking, but that's kind of an important piece, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a quick update on the parkade. So it looks, we've got the app up and running for a couple weeks now. So it's using the pay by phone only in the parkade. And the first few weeks we kind of averaged about 75 transactions a day. And that was mostly just the monthly users that transitioned to this app. Now that we've worked out some kinks and everything, then everything works to be doing pretty smoothly with our bylaw officers. Last week, late in the week, I emailed all of the wait list. So that was 65 people received an email saying now it's a day parkade. And even this week, yesterday and today, we're averaging 90 transactions a day. So we'll continue with, social media posts and promoting that it is now a public parkade, because it seems to be working really well for people. We're hoping to get it kind of at that ballpark 140, 150, which is 80% of the parkade, so that there are stalls always available when people try, but that we, increase that utilization, which is what we wanted.
And then phase 2 of that, of course, is to roll out that same pay by phone app for all the parking meters. Mm-hmm. So once we've sort of got comfortable with how it works at the parkade, we'll kind of look at that phase 2 in the next couple of months, I would think. And
yeah, we've already started on the back end side of it, just entering all the meters into a big Excel so that they can put it into their system.
Councilor Pinero.
Is there any plans for the parkade to have both? Like, can you pay with money, or?
Not at this time. I think if people are looking for other options, we've got the base stations at Hall Street or down at Lakeside. We've got the commuter passes if you're looking for more of a day rate that you can come into City Hall, pay by cash, and get the permits to put on your dash. There are a lot of other options if they want, just not specifically in the parkade. So, and we have had, maybe one or two, but we've also had a lot of people that were a little bit resistant to the app, and they've come in and we've kind of walked them through it, and they came back and said, it's a lot easier than I thought. You are able to prepay for a week up to a time, so whether you're staying at the hotel or you work Monday to Friday, you can pay for the week, so you only have to do it once. It just doesn't guarantee you a stall. So you do have a slight risk that there won't be a stall available, but we definitely haven't hit that point yet.
So what you're saying, just for clarity, by the transaction number, so you're talking about 80 transactions a day, the parkade's still only being 2/3 used?
Yeah, we're
the number
looking
of spots.
It looks like 50% right now. Yeah, which is what we were seeing beforehand, and it kind of makes sense because we haven't done a ton of advertising for it, so it's kind of the monthly users continuing to use it.
there's a lot of little things I think we can do to, we're talking about getting some better and more signage, like something out on the sidewalk there when you're driving by. Like, I know when you kind of come down that street, if there was a sign that told you, parkade here, because right now it looks a little bit kind of nondescript. You're looking at it going like, can I really pull in there? So if you had something there that really identified like, hey, this is public parking, I think you get a lot more of the tourists kind of pulling in there, right, when they're coming in off the four-way stop. So, yeah. Whatever, the normal stop. Yeah.
Cool, and then we'll flip over to the expenses side. So in protective services, we're trending on budget. Within that is a few sections. So we've got the fire operations, which is trending slightly higher than budget, mostly due to the increase in the new collective agreement that was slightly higher than what we had budgeted, as well as an increase in overtime. So we were talking to the chief the other day, and he's got, year to date, he's had 1,100 calls. And for 2023, there was a total of 1,200 calls for the year. So it's significantly more this year. So we're seeing a lot of overtime because of that.
Also, okay, another question?
If we can go back for just 1 second to, I'm just really interested in the BC Transit projecting 13% increase, and we're not seeing that. Do they have any thoughts around that? Is that anything that's come up with the Transit Commission for, just seems unusual to me.
Yeah, I mean,
Where do they get their projections, I guess, is one of the pieces of information I don't have.
Well, I know in the Lower Mainland, they're seeing ridership up above pre-COVID levels already, and I think they were sort of expecting we'd see that here. It's just been a bit slower than, it's a small percentage of our costs for transit, like the actual coin that goes in there. But yeah, we didn't see the huge uptick of that 13% so far that I've seen, but that was just up until June, so we still got another half year here, and September will come, right? And that's when people go back to school, so we might see some more there for that period. Interesting, we did have transit here in town. Their vice president of operations was here today, and they're super pleased with everything. Like, all our metrics are up 95 or 99.5%, as far as our on time pickups and our routes. All other metrics are just like night and day from as soon as we took over in April. So super pleased there. We've also, just the driver satisfaction when they come and talk to the new drivers there, they're all super happy to be here. So everything's running really smoothly, and I think, it's been a good first, trial period there. We'll have a whole year under our belts, and we'll be able to kind of look back and evaluate how the whole year went.
Do you have any idea of the uptake on the UMO app?
Yeah, I haven't got any stats on that yet. I know we did it like sort of a cold, soft launch, like it wasn't sort of a, one or the other type of thing, right? So probably more as you get to the end of the year, and now in 2025, we're not selling some of those products, that there'll have to be a bit more marketing around it. But I'll check in. I haven't kind of got any statistics back on, how many people are using it versus the old product, right?
I can say from just conversations happening at the front cashiers, people are pretty excited about especially those that are buying monthly passes or semester passes, because you have the option to register your card or put it on your phone, and just in case you lose that, they can actually transfer that balance, whereas if you lost a paper card or a physical card in the past, it was you bought a new one.
I used up my bus ticket and got mine last week on my phone. It's great. I love that. And I have one other one about the next page. So the FireSmart, I'm interested in what FireSmart equipment costs. I thought FireSmart was primarily covered by grants. So we had to buy some stuff to...
Yeah, and it's, kind of the funny way accountants do stuff is even though it's grant funded, we still show it there, and then you're going to have some more grant revenue at the top. So, when you see an increase there over the prior year, it's, a budgeted increase. We were anticipating that because we knew we had some grant funding to cover that.
Okay, so we had an increase in the cost, but we also had an increase in the grant, so
Correct.
We're still in pretty good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and just kind of getting back to the issue with fire and the number of calls that they've been having, they on their first responder calls, they're sending out 2 instead of just 1, just for safety reasons. So there's that. But, we're in the process or we're going to start getting, the process rolling. I think we did the RFP already and kind of doing that evaluation on the fire master plan and that community risk assessment. So as we kind of go through that and get some learnings from that on how to sort of set us up for the future, I think that'll help. In addition, I know we're exploring some kind of alternatives for how we operate dispatch that would allow, for less overtime on those call outs that are after hours. So there's some things that are sort of in the works that hopefully will help ease some pressure on the fire department in the future.
Awesome, sounds good.
On the flip side of protective services, the police is doing a little bit better than prior year, and that's primarily due to a one-time saving on a WCB claim that we received early this year, as well as some hiring for 2024 was delayed until a later time in the year. Not included in the Q2 mark, but just afterwards, we'll also see a slight savings from our inspector position being unfilled for a few months.
Yeah, I think they expect that new position to come in November, so there's a bit of a lag period there where we won't have someone in that role. I think we'll be talking a little bit more about police later on, but yeah, there is some one-time reductions in the cost for 2024.
Looking at expenses as a percentage again, we see sewer utility trending over budget, and that's primarily due to the force main repairs we had earlier this year. Crews continue to monitor that one.
And just like sort of quantify that a little bit, I was talking to Scott Eagleson. So on the force main monitoring and repairs, we spent $108,000 in 2024. There's probably going to be another $35,000 or so in September, he estimates, when we get folks back just for an inspection. And so part of this now is what can we do as we kind of work towards our wastewater treatment plant replacement and force main. We have the liquid waste management plan process also going on at the same time. They're at that respondents portion. I think we got 175 feedback on the survey that went out, which is really good. We're going to try and see if we can expedite the last two phases of that a little bit, so we can kind of work towards that resolution on, where's the treatment plant going to be, what kind of, do we need a like-for-like type replacement? Is it in a different location? So just kind of looking at that piece.
Nelson Hydro operating expenses are trending over budget primarily due to power purchases, as mentioned in some previous council meetings back in January. And that was after rates were determined, so that's why you don't see the correlation on the revenue and expenses. We've also seen an increase in regulatory costs, both of which can be recovered in future rates.
Yeah, that hydro piece, I don't know if you remember, was January 13th. We had that big cold snap, and I believe at that time, we were discussing what impact that had on our demand charges that we get from Fortis. So, I'm sure we've talked about this many times, but when you do get that spike in demand, now it's the next 12 months that we sort of have that in our power purchase costs. So at that time, we were estimating about $530,000 in additional power purchase costs for the year. So that's why you sort of see that anomaly of why is our revenue down, but our power purchase is up? Because you would expect them to kind of go in tandem. It's really that demand charge that your residential customer doesn't pay a demand charge, it's the commercial. So really that's just a cost of hydro. So that'll have to be factored into our rates for next year when we do the, on the rural side, we have a variance account where we'll pick up some of that. And on the urban side, we'll have to kind of factor that into for our rate increase next year.
Councillor Payne.
Where does the new bylaw position fit in? Is that general government?
No, they fit in under protective services.
They are still under protective services. Okay.
Now I'll pass it over to Chris.
Yeah, I just want to check if I had anything more on the expense side to, I think we should talk a little bit about the encampment costs. So we tallied all of that up. And so the total for the costs out here, which would include our public works staff, any fire or police overtime. Main one is the additional security that we had to bring in, but the total for that was $130,327. So that was something we didn't have in the budget, of course, that we had to just absorb into our operating budget. I did circulate with the corporate officer a notice of motion that Cranbrook had done to, invoice the province for those costs. My recommendation is we do something similar here to kind of put that front and center of what that impact of that was. So yeah, that's what we're looking at in the current costs, and yeah.
Councilor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. Does that cost include the cleanup, the extra damages that were caused?
Yep, there was some vandalism repair. There was, we had a third-party contractor come and help with some of the moving. Some of that cleanup, it's all included in there.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Payne.
I just had one more thing. So environmental health services, this always just,
Yeah.
so they're above budget because they're working at capacity. Is that a result of more people needing to be
Yeah,
interred?
it's a pretty, if you go back to kind of the operating side here, like it's a very small line
Yeah,
item,
yeah.
so it doesn't take much to,
Okay.
kind
That's
of
all
go over. If you're
we don't need to
50% and they
spend a lot of
spend an
time.
extra 10 grand, then
Got it.
it looks
I was
like
just
it's,
trying to understand
yeah.
that. Because if they're working at maximum capacity, we certainly want to take care of the staff that they're not
Yeah.
overwhelmed on a regular basis. So
Yeah,
as
it's,
the baby boomers are coming along, is this going to be an issue or going to be, but whatever.
yeah, it's a tricky one because it's so small that it kind of sticks out every time
Okay.
you kind of miss it by a couple bucks, right?
Thank
So,
you.
yeah.
I think you will see likely a capital request coming in this budget year of changing out how we collect from manual to more automated. So Charlie Henderson is looking at how do we revamp this service to collect in a different way where, we need to look at changing that. So you'll see that later.
Okay.
Okay. Capital. How are we doing for now?
517.
Okay, lots of time. So one sort of trend I was seeing when I was sort of going through where we're at and checking in with the departments on different capital projects is we really had a bit of a slow start to the year. So when I go through and look at these, a lot of them are still in that procurement process of, hey, we got an RFP out there, we just complete the RFP, or it's still in that stage. And, really top of mind is, the Civic Roof project was massive. So that's taken a big front loading of our time over definitely going through our procurement department there. They had a lot of those 8 or 9 that they had to do just for that one project. So that sort of slowed things down a little bit, and we're, I think that most of that is behind, and now we've been able to kind of pick up and start some of those other projects. So a bit of a slow start on one side as we kind of tackled the Civic project. I don't know, Kevin, if there's anything you want to mention as an update on the Civic Roof, or we're just kind of still in that initial stages of, getting the steel kind of mock-up put in place and things like that. But
I think as far as budget-wise, they're doing really well there. I think we procured the major components. It is a complex project. How do you, it's an 80-year-old building, and each one of those pilasters, the columns that hold up the trusses are somewhat unique. When they're poured back 80 years ago, they're each formed separately, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the complicating. We've also looked at the design. We did another review of the design with another engineering near to just how they will attach to those columns is tricky. So we wanted to make sure that was correct. They're looking at potentially jacking the building up to deal with some of the deflection that's there. It's 80-year-old wood with some of those splintered or showing stress fractures, etc. So we wanted to double check to make sure that we're not gonna. Everyone's gonna be safe when that procedure happens. So, but timeline where it's mid-August now, and we have the first mock-up truss, or the first truss is here, and there. That should be installed within the week, and each one will be, kind of custom, almost custom built in some ways. So they're fitting a lot of that on site. So it's so once we get this first one up, then the hope is that the rest will go fairly quickly, and but the rest of the progress has gone really well. So.
So the first one that's on this slide here, the Hydro Mill Street Substation. So July 9th, 2021 was when that T41 transformer failed. So that's how long this project's kind of been on the go. They had the first replacement transformer in there now. The second one arrives in September, and they hope to have this commissioned sort of by the end of November. Some great benefits from this now, like we have increased capacity now on this station once we're up and running, which kind of sets us up for that future-ready type of infrastructure. Improved reliability. I mean, these are newer transformers, more reliable, less maintenance. It's going to reduce the risk once this is all built of those wildlife strikes, which I don't know if you saw the pictures of the poor crow that, took out the first one. Hopefully that'll be the last victim of the substation. So we'll have that increased reliability there, and just lower maintenance costs as well of kind of that ongoing upkeep. There's more digital. There's better data that we can get from this. Better SCADA systems, more automation. It'll be state of the art once it's up and running.
Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So one of the things that seems to be definitely happening with climate change is this sort of intensity of heat. We're up in the high 20s, mid, 30s, 33, and so the summer draw on the electrical grid here is obviously must be increasing. People are installing hopefully heat pumps, but probably AC, and do you feel like that continuous draw over year, which it's probably going to increase, I would imagine, each summer? Are we in a position to be able to withstand that? Because it doesn't seem like there was much cooling this summer. It pretty much went up in mid-June and stayed the entire summer.
Yeah, interesting. So we're going to have, if you can believe it, Nelson Hydro coming in September to start their budget process for next year. Which, So these are some great questions that we can sort of front load the team with to bring back. But I'll tell you from my analysis, when I look at that correlation between heating and cooling degree days and revenue, I really don't see the impact of heat like I do with cold. Like cold really has a major impact on revenue. It's super hard to sort of predict your revenue year over year because it can have such an impact. The heating, like if you have a bunch of heating degree days, it's nominal what that shows in revenue. It might just be that it's not as prevalent yet to have air conditioning. Like I don't have it at my house. I know more and more people are getting it, but maybe it's just not there yet, whereas everybody has heating.
Right. Okay.
So I just don't think we're there yet at the point where it's probably getting, like you say, more and more of an impact, but when I look back historically, it's not having that driving force.
Sorry, a supplemental, Mayor? I just think the average person, as in either my family, average family, that, we're like, okay, like each summer is like this. So, by next summer, let's have a heat pump and then people will be making those decisions year over year and it'll increase, I would imagine, heating in the winter. So it'll be cooling pretty continuous over Nelson during the summer.
Yeah. Totally. I used to sell it to my family of like, well, it's just like 1 week a year. Why do we need air conditioning?
Right.
Now it's like, well, it's only 6 weeks,
Right.
So
and soon
you're right.
it'll be,
And then there is, Councillor Payne, whether or not you believe it or you don't believe it, that in terms of, I hear regularly that if you have a heat pump, because of the efficiency of the heat pump, that once you've got that in your house and you're using it for your air conditioning, is that it uses way less electricity
Fair
than
enough.
for window ACs and 12 fans and
Way less.
whatever is running. So,
Okay.
and it might take us a while before we see the bump, because I think there's a bump coming in terms of electrical usage in summer months. But those units are supposed to be significantly more efficient, so you're not going to see the draw on electricity.
Fair enough, thank you.
People are outside.
We don't really even notice an increase in our summer usage.
These are off.
Yeah. So overall, though, on the Mill Street budget, so it was an $8.7 million budget over that 3-year period. It's looking to come in over budget at $9.1 million. I mean, it's just kind of the nature of some of these bigger projects. It's still, 4.5%, so pretty close. But yeah, they are projecting that this one will come in over budget. There's other areas in the capital budget that will come under, so I'm not too concerned with the overall capital budget. Another sort of unfortunate piece is on the insurance claim. So kind of to backtrack, the replacement of Mill Street was always in the capital plan. It got front loaded with this transformer failure, and we were able to kind of leverage some insurance proceeds to help us with this project. We had anticipated a higher recovery from insurance than we're likely going to get. We'd been looking at $2.7 million for our insurance coverage. It's probably going to come in $1 million under that. So some of the differences there are, there's certain environmental standards that are best practices. An insurance company will only hold the recovery to those that are legislated. So if you have, oil containment is a great example. If you get an oil spill there, you want to ensure that that has the least impact as possible. So you build your oil containment up to a fairly high standard. Apparently that's not legislated. So while we're doing the right thing, we're not able to leverage insurance to kind of cover that piece. So there's, it's a challenge when one transformer isn't covered by insurance and you're replacing two and you're building something that's going to last and take us into the future and has that extra capacity to kind of figure out what that insurance component is. So that's sort of where we're at a bit of an impasse with the insurer, but that's part of their role, and part of our role was to push it as much as we could, and that's where we ended up. Finished water storage. So we'll be doing another RFP on that piece. The initial one that we did had come in quite a bit over budget, so we've scaled that back to just sort of the essential components, and we'll be putting that out in the fall. SIPRA lining, I think we've got all the bids back on that one, and we'll be announcing pretty soon who the successful proponent is in that process. I think we talked a bit about the civic roof already. 5th floor, I think we heard a few times that they're working up in the 5th floor every time the fire alarm went off. So that was 3 times today, but they're definitely doing work up there. So they'll be putting in that hallway so we can have some different smaller office spaces up there. So that work's ongoing now.
Councilor Payne has a question about that.
I'm just interested in, are we doing that renovation as a potential rental, or are we doing expansion? It will be it's sort of an investment with the return of rental in the future. Okay.
Yeah, we've got elections coming in this fall that will be taking some space. We have, we do rent out to the tourism folks are up there as well. So they didn't have a proper space. They were just kind of in the open area. We do have other interested parties that have come forward from time to time and asked, if there's space available, and having something that's a bit smaller or easy to sort of expand or, take this space or both spaces, more flexibility there just sort of opens that up a bit more to who could take it versus just one group to say, hey, you got to take this whole piece, right?
Awesome. Yeah. Sounds great.
Elevators, yeah, again, this is another one that we're just still kind of working through the procurement portion on that. Parkade, we had a budget in there for $200,000 to do structural repairs. We did $100,000, which I think our group is saying is probably the critical pieces that we've that we're able to tackle. We do need to look long-term at the parkade and decide sort of what we're going to invest in that and what we expect or hope where the life is we're going to get out of the parkade. So you can do anything from, let's invest in it so it's a 50-year asset, a 20-year asset, or a 5-year asset. So we'll have to kind of have those hard discussions about what do we see the future of the parkade being and what do we want to put into it to make sure that it'll take us to that point. Rather than just doing these little pieces of 100,000 here, 50,000 there, probably want to look at it a little bit more big picture. Salvation Army stair replacement is complete. I took that photo, and I got to say I really love the stairs. And I think like if you were dropping off your kid to go down there to do dance and just having it be more open and you can see in behind and everything. I think it looks awesome.
Big up.
Waterfront pathway. So that's again just still in the RFP process, and we'll have to kind of take a look at I think that closed yesterday. So we'll have to take a look at those bids that came in and kind of decide that the next path forward. Yep.
That was grant funded as well, right?
Yeah, a portion of it, not the whole thing. But yeah, we did get a $500,000 grant, I think, from, what are they called, like Trails BC or something like that, or I can't remember who.
Part of the Trans-Canada.
Yeah.
This is that section on Lakeside Drive?
Yes. Yeah, between the mall and the Prestige.
Where the train tracks do this?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So 500,000. I got another 60,000 grant from another group, and I think the developer is going to contribute some as well. So, and then there will be some from us, but some substantial funding from other parties. Transit Exchange. So we sort of continue with our meetings there. BC Transit's taking that whole procurement process. I have to say, are quite, if you talk about the city sort of being slow and doing things, their internal process has been a bit slower than I would have thought. Have I made the rapid transit joke yet? I don't know.
It does concern. Sorry.
So my concern is, given where we're at now and we're pushing up against winter and, they have I'm asking if there's any way they can sort of fast track this, but they do have a 28-day period that they have to post on BC Bid for, tenders. So I'm saying as soon as we can find out if this is happening this year or if it's a spring 2025, you got to let us know.
Councilor Ward.
Yeah, I saw that, and thank you, Mayor. I was quite concerned about all the concrete pour and everything that's going to happen there in November.
Yeah, they seem pretty comfortable with the concrete. It's the asphalt part.
Yeah.
And one of their thoughts was, well, what if we do the concrete and then we come back? And I said, I don't think anybody wants to see you there twice. Especially the businesses, let's just get it done. Don't show up and then tell people, hey, we'll be back again next year. Just do the whole thing at once and be finished. And if we can keep it out of that summertime sort of tourist season, I think that's preferable.
This is a complete sidebar about this transit thing, but I drove through that corner the other day and I noticed that the Dr. Sonichin's office, that building there, they have ripped up all of the landscaping at the front of their building. And I think it might be a worthwhile endeavor for somebody to go down there and say, if the transit hub is coming, please don't replant until, it just seems like they've taken that out in case a piece of equipment ends up being in there or all of the things that can go wrong so that we're not, replanting his expensive landscaping, that perhaps they can hold off until the spring.
Yeah.
But I think that building used to have junipers. I think they fire smarted the building. I was trying to remember what was in front of it, but it is gone. It is from the sidewalk to the building, there is nothing in front of that building right now. So it would be good that they don't put something back in there, I think.
Yeah, okay, no, that's good. I'll make sure that we communicate with, and not just them, but everybody as soon as we know what's going on here.
Yeah, but that's just before they,
yeah,
just a little maybe don't put anything back in there right yet.
No, that's a good thought. Thank you.
And again, just to recognize that this is grant funded, right?
Yes. Yep. Hall Street Pier. So that project did wrap up June 28th. I think the piece that everybody's thinking about now is the ladybird enclosure and what's going on there. So the ladybird is out of its cage, I guess, out of its home right now. Issue was with those diffusers, which pumps the air, like kind of focuses the air, the cool air out of the bottom there that wasn't circulating amongst the whole enclosure. And so what they've done, and I just went by at lunch and took a look, is they kind of narrowed that diffuser a little bit so that it'll sort of shoot with a bit more force and try and fill the whole enclosure. So we'll have to kind of see if that works. And if it does, I think they need to pretty them up a little bit because it looks a bit rough in there. I think they've just sort of put something in there to see if it's going to work. But if they can make that a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, and if it does what it's meant to do, then I think that should solve it. But we'll see. I think they just want to test that out a little bit before they go and roll a boat back in there.
Councillor Payne.
I was down there the day that they brought the ladybird down, and there was a crane and everything, so it seems like a fairly expensive procedure getting that boat in and out. Is that covered by the grant and the,
Yeah, so
do you know where those additional expenses, I guess, is what I'm going for?
I believe part of the project is we put the ladybird in there, and then the museum took it out. So they hoisted it out. So as for who's going to be putting it back in again, it's yet to be determined, I suppose. But I would imagine, we'd have to be talking to, the mechanical folks as well, because this was something that they were supposed to have working from day one. Yeah. So we shouldn't be on the hook for additional costs.
Yeah, I would hope not.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
no, we're definitely pushing back against
Yeah.
the, the design and it sounds like it's more the installation than the design, but anyway, we
Okay.
are cognizant that this should not be additional cost to
Yeah,
the
they just didn't
city.
drive it over and push it in.
I wish that
Put
it was,
way.
like that,
Yeah.
but you're right, there's
It was-
crane action
It was
involved.
quite an event.
Yeah.
And the seating, like,
Yeah, so there's some additional components still to come. So I think Flat Rock's got some benches that are going to show up there later. Trying to think of anything else. Oh, it's, I think a bylaw is going to be coming in November for some additional like signage and things around there. Perhaps some buoys out there to just sort of tell folks that they can't tie up right on the wharf. So there's some little pieces that still need to be done as far as signage and protection, no diving and that kind of thing.
Councillor Lockwood.
Can I just say a few things about that sign? Like
The sign of a million things.
the sign of a million things. I'm sure it's there for insurance reasons, but come on, it's a little bit intense. The no fishing, I saw a bunch of kids there fishing in the morning and it was awesome.
Yeah.
Like, that's so great. And like, catch any fish? And how's this? And then I walk up, I'm like, what? There's the sign says no fishing. Damn it. And then there's the no diving. I mean, I don't get that. I'm sure there's an insurance thing or.
I haven't actually seen the sign. I didn't see it when I was down there, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's because the water is.
Changes.
level.
and
The water level
the water
goes up
level
and
changes
down.
there, so.
Yeah. and
Dive
it's-
at your
There's
own
times
risk.
of the year when I'm sure it's this.
And just,
Well, not
you're
during
right,
the
the,
summer, like this is
the sign is, there's a lot of things on the sign, but our insurers wanted all of that stuff on the
Yeah.
sign, so.
okay.
Yeah,
Even the fish.
puts the onus back on
Yeah.
the user, right?
The fishing though, is that?
Yeah,
Catch a big
we
fish,
can-
pulls you off the
we
dock.
can ask about fishing.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I would be pro fish at your own risk.
Yeah.
No fishing while swimming. Just being realistic about what the
Right.
problems are. Like,
Or fishing for people under 5 feet, that kind of thing.
Or maybe between this time and this time.
yeah,
Some-
like evenings and mornings
It's the
or.
hook thing.
Yeah, there's the hook
Yeah,
thing.
I can see it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
No fly fishing.
Yeah.
No fly fishing, that's fair.
But I would say the diving is definitely an insurance thing, because that water does vary in depth considerably.
Yeah.
And right now it's very low.
Yeah, but I mean, I was just swimming there. You'd be hard pressed to hit the bottom. Like, I don't even know how you would hit the bottom. It's just
Middle of winter.
in the middle of the winter. Yeah, maybe.
Is that
Oh,
an X,
wind
like, there's been a lot of docks there. Has it been cleared of underwater pylons and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, it's just got weeds now. It's got seaweed.
Yeah.
Lake
Lake
I think our
weed.
staff dealt with that.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, every time I'm down there, there's kids swimming. and
Oh, everybody loves it.
Tons
Yeah.
of fun. The only thing is the ladder on the outside is still a must. We need a ladder.
Yeah, I think we just have to deal with, because boats come in that side, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so we just
but
have to.
boats are not supposed to be there.
No, they come into the Prestige, they tie up to the
Right.
Prestige on that side.
On the front side, like
Yeah.
on the front side, I think that's a good, probably the only spot you would need the ladder because you're not
Yeah.
jumping off either side. One side's kind of weedy, the other side's.
Yeah.
I think at the
boats
end.
are there.
I would think at the end. I think the end is
And
where you
in
want to
part,
have
I
a
think
ladder.
for an insurance perspective, let alone to make it a better
Yeah,
experience,
no,
like
We agree. And
yeah.
like I said, I think we just need to, identify a boat channel coming in versus, like, someone could come straight across there into the Prestige, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think we want to sort of do something to this is a safer swimming area, and this is where boats are supposed to
Sure.
access the Prestige, right?
Yeah.
Councillor Tate.
The last time I was there, I didn't notice one of those life-saving rings. That would be something I would think could be down there as well. I don't think we mentioned that in the last one.
No, but that did come up the last time. Somebody mentioned about
Okay.
having the ring. I don't know. Do we have one at Lakeside Park?
Not sure if
On
we
the
do
pier.
anymore.
That I don't know, but Lakeside Park is,
I'm thinking about when
It's
people
beach entry,
when
yeah.
people jump off the pier and the pylons there.
Oh.
Maybe we don't want to have a life-saving ring there, just so we don't encourage that. But
that I don't know.
because people fall off. I've seen people fall off trying to grab their boats just to bring them on, so to get them on their trailers and fall into the drink. So
There is a wharf bylaw, and it does not allow for swimming at that pier
Oh,
in
okay,
Lakeside.
so that's
So
why.
that is why, yeah.
but when I have seen people fall in off the. It's okay.
Oh, sorry, one more thing. I know this is in our parks bylaw, about the dogs on the pier, or is that right?
It's also on the sign.
No, yeah, but I'm disputing, I'm questioning
Item 15.
the value of having that. But I don't want to, if it's already in a bylaw, or is it just something we decided arbitrarily?
And, that part of the
In the
walkway is
Dog on leash.
Leash,
Leash
yeah.
dog.
Yeah, but it says no dogs on the sign.
At a certain time of year,
No, I think
have them there on leash.
I think it says
Dog
no
on it.
dogs in the swim area.
On the.
Oh, is that what it says?
Yeah, that's what.
I read it.
No. Then again, who's policing? Okay, thanks.
Insurance companies just trying to keep us all
Yeah.
very safe because it only takes one person to ruin it for everybody.
Anything else on the pier? Lighting was commissioned already, so that's good to go. So that they started done that handover to our staff, so we know how to control the lights and the different. We can do different kind of shades and lighting configurations and things like that. The other piece, and not to kind of throw Sarah a wild card, but I think as part of the bylaw update, when we talk about fees and charges in parks, is update to the rental fees that we're charging. So we need to put something in there to capture the true value, cost, experience of that pier and canopy area. Now that it's built, and we'll start taking reservations, bookings for different events and things like that, which is part of the whole business plan that we put together in the first place for the pier and the canopy.
Thank you.
Councillor Payne, then Councillor Tate.
I'm interested to understand when we go into water restriction level 2, how Public Works, I'm assuming they have a master control unit that shuts off certain irrigation systems to comply with the regulations, or is that?
Like the stuff in the
Watering
parks?
somewhere
Yeah.
in particular?
So the parks
The
are.
pier is why I'm.
Yeah. We take the water for
Out
the
of the
parks
lake.
from the lake.
This is something that I've heard before. Do
Yes.
people understand that? How have we communicated that to the public? Because to me, it looks like do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
When I'm walking down there and water is spraying everywhere.
This location too?
I think Lakeside, I'm
Lakeside,
not
and
here,
the
yeah.
cemetery is
Oh,
done
the
by the well.
cemetery is the other
Yeah.
one, the well, yeah.
It's done by the well.
And I'm
Talking
assuming we must be watering out here because we're totally green. Are we not watering the city hall grass? Because it's
Yeah, I
greener
don't-
than anything I've seen around.
Yeah, it has
know what the schedule is,
irrigation
but.
Okay.
in it, yeah.
I think
But they do.
it is important though to articulate, hey, in many places we draw from non-municipal treated water sources, but also green space, public green space is green space for the public. It's the shared space too. It does warrant on some value level an additional investment for everybody. It's not my front yard. It's not my private front yard. It's the public's front yard.
Okay.
Just in some spots for sure.
Yeah, we shouldn't see water running onto the road and things like, we definitely shouldn't be overwatering, so we can certainly find out.
Yeah, I think it's just a fine distinction for people to understand that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we've done a lot of work over the years
Yeah.
to make sure that we weren't using potable water in our irrigation systems where possible, so.
I think when we water the plants downtown, we take the water from the well, right? From this downtown.
That's,
Well, there is-
that's from the lake.
There's an intake.
They fill the
from
truck.
lake, yeah.
Whatever,
Yeah.
we
They fill
don't
the truck
use,
at the lake.
doesn't pull out tap and take drinking water to water the flowers downtown.
Yeah, and I think most of us understand that, but I again think there's communication around
Messaging,
it, that if we're asking people to, have that common goal of conserving water, then a demonstration that we're on that too is pretty important to me. So just wondering how that all works when we go to that level.
Okay. I won't go through all of these because, like I say, a lot of them are still in sort of that planning RFP sort of process piece. NG 911, we did award to the successful proponent. Intrado is the name of the company. We're being assigned a project manager. We'll kind of get that kickoff meeting going in the next week here. Police, fire, IT are all very happy with the product. Was an affordable option. And by affordable, I mean not just on those upfront costs, but those ongoing operating costs too, which it's pretty easy to get sort of dazzled by grant funds and then you're left on the hook with something that costs a lot of money to maintain over time. So we got something that was sort of reasonable in that respect. Bit more plug and play and less customization, but police are super happy with it. And I think it'll be a good solution for us over the long term. Maybe more on that IT front, since we're talking about phishing, the cybersecurity piece. It's not as big a reaction as it's hoping, I gotta admit.
Real fishing and virtual fishing. Two different kinds of fishing.
The fish.
So we're still kind of working through a best approach to getting that VISCO, Virtual Chief Information Security Officer role. The province had come out with sort of a list of preferred vendors and already vetted that we would be able to go directly to that and not have to go through sort of that RFP process, which would really streamline things. But at the same time, we weren't just sitting around waiting for this to come out. We've been doing a lot of things in the background. I probably already talked about some of the cybersecurity training that we're doing, and I think everybody on staff is getting regular kind of fake phishing emails, and the repercussions of clicking on the link is you got to do further training. So that's been rolled out citywide. I think everybody's taken the training so far. Kind of working on some other initiatives as well. In addition to that, sort of segregating some of our servers to make sure that if one entity, say like a Nelson Hydro or the city, was impacted, that would shield the others from that kind of corporate-wide sort of impact. So things like that. We've got software in place that will ensure that we've got all our regular security updates happening automatically. It's not a manual process anymore, so we're staying up to date on those security updates. So there's a few things that we're sort of checking off from that cybersecurity audit that we got done, and then in the background trying to make some headway on kind of getting that consultant role in place to guide us through more of the policy-based side of things. Those are kind of the big ticket items. Like I say, we're still kind of chipping away at some of those other things. Now that we've gone through the procurement for the civic roof, we'll be able to tackle some of those other projects.
Okay. Councilors, do you have any other, I think that's the end of your report, isn't it?
Yeah.
Councilors, if you don't have any other questions, we will thank staff for giving us a fulsome Q2 update, and then I will ask for a recess as we are having to walk somewhere for dinner tonight. Moved by Councilor Woodward, seconded by Councilor Lockenberg. All those in favor? Thank you very much, Chris and Amy. That motion carries. And can't wait for Q3.
Just right around the corner.
Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. If I could have a motion to reconvene, please. Moved by Councilor Payne, seconded by Councilor Page. And we're on item 7, and so we'll give just a few minutes, just because we haven't been together for a few weeks. Just if people have some very brief reports, because we have a lot on the agenda tonight. But do you have anything to report? You've been on vacation.
I've been on vacation. Chris?
That I didn't, just weren't really Q2 finance related, so I just sort of parked them for a second. I guess a couple of things on the, positive news. We received $40,000 for our affordable housing fund, which is great. So we had sold some land back in 2019, Habitat for Humanities, and with that kind of came some stipulations to that it would be used for affordable housing by them for a project of some sorts that they would kind of develop, and that didn't occur, so the lawyer was holding those in trust and had given them back to the city now, so we can put that straight into our affordable housing fund. So I thought that was great news for something that's top of mind as we kind of work through some of the things in the workshop as well. Some information from BC Transit. So they're giving us an opportunity here to right-size our fleet. So we have 2 medium-duty buses, and the remainder of our fleet is heavy-duty. So we can swap out those medium-duty for some heavy-duty. So all of our 6 buses would be heavy-duty buses, nice. Which gives us a lot more flexibility in the routes, gives us more capacity on some of those morning routes that go up to the Trafalgar and LVR and things like that, which is great. Also, now our mechanics just have that one type of bus to work on, one set of parts. It does come with a little bit of a higher operating cost. So I think we mapped it out, and we'd be looking at an additional $11,000 for us for 2025. It won't start till 2025, but I think the positives outweigh that, and just the fact that we have that, like I say, one piece of equipment to maintain for our mechanics to be trained on, to have parts for, and the flexibility to kind of move that around.
And Chris, you did speak to the or the BC Transit here and what they've found in our operating of the system earlier, but maybe
Yeah.
a good time here.
No, they're super positive. So we had their vice president of operations come here, Tim, can't remember his last name, Tim, as well as, our representative, Elise, which I think you've met before, and Anthony, which kind of supports Jody's team over there. And they had nothing but like great reviews to give for the transit system and how that's, like from the minute we picked that up, the reliability of the service, the customer service, just the drop off in complaints that they've received. So it's just been super positive across the board. Our staff are really loving the challenge. The drivers are really happy. So just good news story all around. So hopefully that's the same kind of feeling that they have out in the regional district and in the customers and stuff as well. But so far feedback's just been excellent.
Just wanted to ask one question.
Yeah, Councillor Payne, then Councillor Woodward.
Thank you.
There was some talk at some point in time about electric buses. Is that going to be part of the right sizing? I know there was some blips with the manufacturer, and is that back on the radar yet, or?
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit today as well when they came by. So we're still slated to get those buses probably later in 2025, but in 2025. That's the plan that they have, and they've added a little bit of cushion into that. So hopefully by the end of 2025, we'll see those come to Nelson.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. My question was, the buses that we are receiving, are they new buses or are they used buses?
Yeah, we're going to do a swap with the group out in the RDKB. So they've got some larger buses that they want to swap out for some smaller ones, just because they're probably over capacity for what they need. So I think this is perfect for the region, that we kind of keep those units. It's really hard to get these full heavy duty buses. And we've been asking for them for a while. So this is kind of a good opportunity, win-win for both systems to kind of that's why they're calling it right sizing. We need bigger, they don't need the larger capacity. So it kind of works in everybody's best interest to do that kind of switch. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Payne.
Just one last question. I'm interested, you're saying the feedback that BC Transit's receiving is very positive. Do they ever do an annual customer service satisfaction survey? I am not aware of one, and I'm not a heavy duty user, but I am a user, so just interested. Have you ever heard of that? Or?
Yeah, I'm not sure. They're using more of those metrics as far as, how often it's late, how often we miss a route, that type of thing. But, number of complaints, that type of thing. But I don't know if they do a survey. I'll find out.
Because, one of our goals, both stated and implicit, is the fact that we want more people on transit. So if we're not asking people why they are or why they aren't using, it's sort of challenging to create the environment where they would. So just wondering how we can participate in that.
In that case, it might be good to capture the other side of that too, the folks that don't use the
that's
bus,
what I mean.
Yeah, so you can ask the people on the bus why they use it, but it might be also interesting to ask those that are driving, why you chose to drive, or that's interesting, yeah.
Especially with the uptick in reliability, because people may have purchased a vehicle in response to the lack of reliability and don't really understand that's shifted around, so that opportunity is there again. So I don't know. I'll check if I follow BC Transit, but I haven't really seen anything, and I don't know if they would do targeted geographic socials to help people understand the changes that have happened.
Yeah, I know when they do the transit plan, there's a big public consultation part of that, but I'm not sure in between those periods of time, what kind of outreach they do directly to customers.
So I can't speak on that. I was trying to remember something. There's this thing, and you can see it on the BC Transit website. It's the Voice of the Rider panel.
Okay.
So they have a couple of engagement, regular engagement systems and processes, but certainly around the transit future services planning process, there is a pretty extensive public engagement. But I think it's a great point, and I don't think we're doing enough to not just understand why people aren't using it, but also try to figure out what messages resonate with people so that we can reach them better. We don't do a lot of marketing per se like, yeah.
And I mean, it's not really our job, but with our stated goals in Nelson Next, it sort of ties into what our objectives are.
Yeah, I'll reach out to BC Transit, see what kind of stuff they do and, you know, what sort of timing they do on that.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. And last thing, I think is a bit of a follow-up from the last meeting that I was not able to attend, but I think the mayor had a question about tax deferments, and you were wondering how many folks were on it this year versus last year. Yeah. So Amy got me some numbers, and she says in 2023 we had 157 people on it, and 2024 we actually went down one, so we're at 156.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's all from me.
Okay, councillors. Councillor Woodward.
I went to along with you, Mayor, and Leslie was the launch of the new chair, the floating chair at the Lakeside Park. You weren't there? Okay. So the Rotary Club fundraised and got this very cool chair floating piece, which you can strap somebody into who's unable to get across the sand. And there's also this very cleverly designed mat that goes down to the water. And then the city actually poured a quite beautiful concrete path, all really fast. I have to say, it all came together. I think you mentioned that, Mayor, that it was like a very quick build and got it all together. And so they had a ribbon cutting, and there was a woman there in a wheelchair, and she volunteered to be the first person. So we took her down, and it was a wonderful experience. And it was felt like it's really incredible what the Rotary can do if they put their mind to it and their energy. And so now anybody who is unable to get across the sand at Lakeside Park can rent this chair.
It's free. It's free.
Oh, free.
Just reserve it then.
Yeah, you can reserve it,
Yeah.
but it's no cost
Right.
to use the Moby chair.
So Moby chair, thank you. So that was a beautiful little event, and that's now part of our assets of this town.
Councillor Lockenberg, I see a finger that.
I'll try to be quick. So one of the committees I sit on is the BC Municipal Climate Leadership Council. And this week we had a meeting with Minister Cullen from the Ministry of Land, Water, Resource Stewardship. BCMCLC is this group of locally elected councillors, mayors, and regional directors who are working towards advocating for more fundings, more supports from the province around climate adaptation and the work around mitigation as well. One of the big initiatives was advocacy for funding for the LGCAP funding and the new funding for local governments. Anyways, with Minister Cullen, the big topic of discussion was the new ecosystem, biodiversity and ecosystem health framework. It's in draft right now, but the concept is for an all-of-government approach to look at government policy in terms of the effects on local ecosystems, and particularly watersheds, and how our development is going to affect water security going forward, especially with provincial drought and then obviously wildfire. So it was really informative, and but more than that, I think the advocacy around more local government control around its local watersheds was the topic, and it was well heard, and I think that's going to be going forward a pretty strong consideration from that. So for us, what that would mean is more say, more consultation in any developments that might be happening, even in terms of private land use around that will have effects on our watershed. So I think it was really positive. And more broadly speaking, this whole of government approach to biodiversity, ecosystem health is really about, yeah, looking at the downstream costs of a lot of the stuff we're doing, whether it be on resource development, but from local development perspective, what we're doing as, local governments, and how the potential cascade of effects will go down through the generations. So very interesting. And the last thing I would say is that Minister Cullen did commit to be at UBCM. And so if we as a council want to consider what our engagement with him would be, then he was obviously very open to that, and something we should look at doing. Because again, the idea there is that a lot of the ministers, a lot of the MLAs won't be there, but he committed to be there. So if we wanted to get a meeting with him, we should. I think we should do it. That's it.
Leslie.
I'll just mention a couple things. I am the council liaison to the Cultural Development Committee, and although we haven't been meeting over the summertime, that group has been incredibly busy in our city, doing what they do best, creating beautiful spaces, places, and drawing the economic vibrancy of tourism in. Mural Fest was amazing on both days. We were absolutely blessed with what I would consider to be perfect weather and tremendous entertainment. The mayor spoke, our MLA spoke, and it was just, to me, an incredible, this is what our town does really, really well. And this is what not only our residents, but everyone who comes here to enjoy that cultural aspect. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger every year. It's pretty incredible. I don't know when they're going to run out of walls, but if you know a wall, Sydney Black would certainly like to hear about it. I'm just going to draw attention to one thing that's moving forward, and that's a group has been gathering from a variety of social service agencies in an attempt to locate a space and understand better the services of what was known as the hub, but they're calling a daycare center. So for the unhoused population to gather and for the service providers to all be together. They're doing a visioning meeting coming up in September, and I'm sure they would welcome, thoughts from everyone at this table. So if there's anything in particular that you see that may contribute to that, please let me know, or Michelle Oakley, who's at still in the ENCO coordinator role until the end of this month, and David Burrows from St. Saviour's Anglican is the co-lead on that with Ryle Juliana from Nelson Community Services and Street Outreach. So I think just a really, really important exercise of how we see our community coming together from all sectors, and residents, businesses, social services, governance. How do we move that forward? Because it's a pretty significant glitch in our community right now. Glitch isn't the right word, I apologize, but we all know the ramifications that we're seeing as a result of that. It's pretty important. And we are waiting for an announcement of a space that the government may be making available for that, but nothing has come forward yet. The only other thing that's exciting news for me, chairing the Housing Committee, is the fact that both BC Nelson Cares and Share Nelson have submitted the pre-development funding proposal to BC Housing, which was due on August 15th, and they should hear back and hopefully have funding by the end of this year to do that pre-development, which is a deep, detailed work that needs to be done to offer significant amounts of non-market housing in our community to people who so desperately need it. That, along with the Chamber's announcement of their workforce housing, just made it sort of a red letter week for me. So very excited to hear that news and just wanted to share it broadly. I think everybody in the community is working really, really hard on this, and it's nice to see steps moving forward. That's what I got.
Councilor Page.
I don't have a lot for you guys, but RDCK has provided their letter of support for the affordable project that's postulated over on Front Street. We've awarded the funds to our RFP process for the Regional Growth Management Planning and Analysis Project, which is a collaboration with the City of Nelson and many of the other municipalities within the regional district and the regional district to get a clear sense, go through the mapping, where can we make investments, where are there infrastructure gaps, where does it make sense to continue to grow across, as a planning exercise to understand what our strategic advancement of growing out this area is going to look like over the years. And then there was some changes around with the proponents for the expansion of the Grumman Narrow site. We've gone in another direction with a different contractor, which will come out a little bit less than the 80,000 it was supposed to be, but just because there were some insurance requirements that didn't get met. But and then we have a climate resilience coordinator we've been using for the last number of years, and was involved a lot in the town halls that were going on. And with the climate action planning exercise, there was a request to extend that person's contract till 2026, and that was approved after a few rounds of discussion on it, mostly in light of all of the requirements coming down for emergency management, all the communication that has to happen around Fire Smart, all the communication and program development that has to happen around how we mitigate these the events that are going on within the regional district because of climate change. And so that was approved, and we'll continue doing that work. And I don't think anything else really stood out for me, so I have questions if you have any.
Anybody else? Okay, I've just got a few things. I've been busy doing all kinds of different sort of fun things. The library, I just saw a picture. Thank you, Tyler, for sharing that picture with me of giving out some awards about the young people that participated in the summer reading program, and it was really a lot of fun. They all got a little medal, and then there was cake and goodies and taking out lots of books, and so it was really exciting for those that finished their reading assignments, and I got to share with them the horrors of going to school and having to do book reports and actually submit them in September. This was, you could read or just come and have fun. I thought, where was that reading program when I was 9 years old? So lots of lovely activities like that. Had the Cornerstone Children's Daycare in for a visit. There's nothing like 3, 4, and 5-year-olds contributing to the OCP by reminding us all that we need to have more parks, more water slides, more spray parks, bigger slides. They wanted some swings that would hold their parents so they could all swing together somewhere. So these were some thoughts that they had to...
I think swings used to be better than they are now. I do. I agree with them. They were more dangerous when we were young.
And therefore better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've got a little picture. They've got it set up at the center there. They built a little town of Nelson, which was kind of fun. So if you can drop in, if you're on 5th Street there by the daycare, maybe see if you can go in and take a look. They did send me some pictures. It's very cute, and they had little lunch bags that they made into the drugstore and the clothing store, and they made a little bridge, and it's their little display of their vision of Nelson. And so I wanted the pictures so I could share it with the OCP team. So I get to do all those kind of fun things. I have been participating in the same meetings that Leslie has regarding whether we call it the daycare center or the old drop-in center there that was on Vernon Street. Yes, the absences of services are a concern to many of the advocates and health providers in the area, and I do believe that September is our next meeting. There wasn't one for August, so meeting again in September to continue discussions about how that looks for the future. It was great to be at the BC Builds announcement. So fingers crossed that project continues to roll out. And what I just want to really remind everybody is that this is August the 20th, and we had this nice break. And I can tell you, like, I'm looking at September, and my calendar is starting to fill up. So, and when I hear earlier today, we talked about Nelson Hydro, and the first presentation from Nelson Hydro is going to be in September at our cow. It's just a reminder that we're going into that season. So the other thing that we're going into is that we need to start contemplating the 2025 Sports Ambassador and the Sustainability Awards. So I'm just launching that thought now to start talking with your communities that you are in for ideas about these nominations. The earlier we start this, the more information that we can get back. And the plan is currently that we would be making these decisions at the November meeting. We've always left this, we've kind of tripped up and ended up having to go later because we didn't all have in our ideas. So this is the first call, early announcement. Start thinking about the 2025 Sports Ambassador and the Sustainability Awards. Remember that we give out 3 of those, and I'm not even going to hazard, like, there's business, individual, and group. And we play around with that a little bit as well, but we do give out 3 and sometimes 4 sustainability awards. So start thinking about that, and hopefully November the 5th, that will be in an in-camera meeting, of course, but we will have those discussions and try to make those selections so that we can give those out at the annual meeting. So that's it for me. I'll just be like the constant announcement of things that we have to get done before the end of the year. Oh yeah, and Hall Street. I was gonna say that till September, but I'll say that now. Just a reminder that we are having the official opening of the Hall Street Pier is going to be on September the 14th at 1 o'clock. It's supposed to be a family-friendly day. I kind of call it like an ice cream social. I don't know that there's going to be ice cream, but like it's a family fun day. I can tell people that the tram will be running for free, so if parking is a problem, and we talked about this when we talked about the vision of the pier and sort of the linkage across, is that this great opportunity is that you can park, under Bob and get on the tram and come up to the pier and experience that if you've never ridden the tram as well. So showing that connectivity along the waterfront. So September the 14th, please put that in your calendar for the official opening of our pier. So there, now I think I got all the PSAs out.
Night market August 30th as well, before our next meeting, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's the last one of the year. And that was rocking at the last one, so I imagine that weather's looking good for the end of the month, so it should be another spectacular night market. Okay. If nobody else has anything or any questions for their fellow councillors, we will move on then to item 10A, approving officer appointment. And that is Section 77 of the Land Titles Act requires that council appoint a person as an approving officer for the city. Up until his recent departure, Sebastian Arcane, the previous Director of Development Services, held this designation. Accordingly, at this time, staff are recommending that Natalie Andradziak, the city's new Director of Development Service and Climate Leadership, be appointed as the approving officer. You have the background there. This is a requirement of the government to have an approving officer, and there is a recommendation before you, council. Can I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconder, Councillor Pinero, Councillor Woodward.
That the Director of Development Service, Natalie Andradziak, be appointed as the city's approving officer pursuant to Section 77 of the Land Titles Act, and further that the planner, Valerie Berthier, be appointed as the deputy approving officer pursuant to Section 77 of the Land Titles Act.
Okay, the recommendation has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Councillor Payne.
I noticed that there's a wide variety of positions within the city that we could draw the approving officers from. And my question is around the level of experience of Valerie Berthier. She is a recent planner, and all of her experience has been within the city of Nelson. So I feel it may give us a bit more breadth if we went with one of the other positions within the city, considering this is a very weighty position from my understanding of it. So in Natalie's, Director Andrew Janczyk's absence, a lot would fall on her, from my perspective, fairly inexperienced shoulders. I don't know if that's fair to her or to the department.
Yeah, so this did, in the past, we've had, like engineering was approving officer in the past. I think, there's generally nothing, these generally aren't urgent. It's not like someone's on holidays and the approving officer has to make a decision on a subdivision, in the director's absence. So it's quite unlikely that the other, the deputy is making those decisions, because they're long processes, right? So I think they're approaching this more from an experience training perspective, as opposed to that the director that would be the approving officer is not available. So I would suggest at this stage, we approve this and we can explore. I'm not sure if we can have more than one deputy, but we could. Why don't you let us explore that?
So in the past, was Director Andrew Janczyk, was she the
Correct.
Deputy approving?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct.
And when she went into that position, she had significantly more experience.
Yeah,
as a
for sure.
planner.
We're a little inexperienced in development services right now.
So there is a requirement then. I understand there's a requirement for an approving officer, but there's a requirement for a deputy approving officer as well.
Correct.
Okay, I didn't read that I didn't understand that from the material.
She has been in the planning department probably for 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She's been there
I
for a
do
while.
understand that. I understand that she's been in the Nelson Planning Department for a significant amount of time, but as a planner, 1 year?
Yeah, that is a recent
Yeah.
posting.
Which is great.
Yeah.
I love to see people working towards a goal and being hired from within and having that opportunity to move forward. As I say, I've just been in situations like this before where it wasn't really fair to the employee to put that level of responsibility
like I said,
on them.
I think, this came from them, and I think it's a development opportunity to understand this, and but I think it's worthwhile looking whether we can appoint more than one deputy.
We can.
Okay, we can?
There's no cap on it.
Okay,
Okay.
so maybe that's the, the
Yeah.
opportunity. I like I said, I've never seen where the approving officer, like subdivisions aren't short-term things, so so I'm not worried about that Natalie wouldn't be available to do subdivisions.
Yep. Just, I saw there was a variety of other positions where we do have a depth of experience that might be
Yeah, I don't know if we have
interesting.
anybody that's been an approving officer.
But, okay, just wanted to get that out there.
Yep.
So we've had that recommendation moved and seconded, and is there any other concerns? All those in favor and opposed?
Can I not be in favor and not be recorded as opposed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. So you're not in favor, just so long as we know that you're not in favor. Okay,
I'm not in favor.
thank you. Okay, and that then passes. It's more about, I just still need to get the count right.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to 10B, Friends of Kootenay Lake funding request. on May the 21st, 2024, Clara Payton from the Kootenay Lake Partnership presented to council an overview of the partnership's mission, achievements, and ongoing projects. The presentation highlighted KLP's role in coordinating efforts to protect the lake's ecology and cultural values, as well as development of the Kootenay Lake Shoreline Guidance document. KLP is now seeking a $2,000 contribution from the City of Nelson to support the coordinator's wages, which is critical for maintaining their effective management and program coordination. So, councillors, there's background. There was the May 21st meeting, and there is a recommendation in front of us.
I'll move the recommendation.
That has been moved, and is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Woodward. Discussion. Councillor Page.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I'm comfortable with the ask, given the extent of essentially shoreline and lake exposure for this particular project. Like the 2,000 to 10,000 doesn't seem like an appropriation that makes sense necessarily, given what the work is and how much of the lake resides well outside of the city itself. And I think there are questions too about, you know, this this group and who it includes. I think it does great work. I just think there's open questions about that. So I don't know. In terms of providing support for this is also outside of the bounds of what we usually provide support for, because we don't have a grant and aid program. Have we contemplated having more discussions with the other partners about what the values or principles are that connected to who's paying what, when, and where? As opposed to a request coming in and saying, yeah, it's not a lot of money, but if Vardy's only paying 10 and we're paying 2, I'd expect to have like a whole arm along the city for that contribution.
Well, and there is some question about whether or not they should have perhaps come to the ready grant process that we already have in place within the city. I'm just going to look, the mover looks like he would like to make comments. So
I agree that we have obviously the ready grant for things like this, and we typically don't do grant and aid. However, I think it's important to provide this funding with the understanding that this isn't going to be ongoing. I imagine that they'll then do ready grant applications in the future. I think we've struggled as a municipality, and we're not alone. I think all local governments struggle with how to incorporate ecosystem and ecosystem services into how we value natural assets and the role they play in supporting a healthy community. This work is really just beginning. And I think the Kootenay Lake Partnership provides a valuable service to us that we're only just beginning to recognize what that value is. And obviously, you know, the way the environment works, there's no hard lines anywhere. So to me, even on a per capita basis, it seems like this is a good contribution for us to make as a city. And again, not an ongoing contribution, but as a one-time thing.
any other councillors? Councillor Payne.
I just think it's an interesting precedent to set that we do need to be clear about, that it's a one-time thing, because there are other organizations who are in a similar spot where their grant funding is diminishing, and they definitely are doing worthwhile things. So I think it's important that we recognize this precedent and make it very clear that this is a one-time if we do move forward with it.
Councillor Pinero.
Is there any way of knowing what sort of impact not having $2,000 would have on their day-to-day? Like, for example, until the next Ready Grant process? Like, is that maybe, I don't know if it can speak
I have
to
some,
that.
I can't speak to the specifics, remember, if I may. In general, this is like leveraged funding. So if you're going to then apply for other grants, showing some contribution from the municipality or the regional district is pretty important. And so I suspect that funding not only this position will give them the capacity to then seek further funding, as well as be able to use it to leverage, to show an in-kind or matching contribution from municipalities. So I'm almost certain that's a part of it. Yeah.
So if you don't, I suppose,
Yeah, go ahead.
my only concern in this grant is that it came up, and I believe it was Councillor Page that asked about it when they were here doing the presentation, is their consultation has only been with Tanaha. And as we know, there is overlapping jurisdiction on the lake, particularly here in Nelson, and whether or not, and it didn't seem from the question, perhaps we weren't clear enough to the presenter, that there was any particular effort going forward to be including the SNIACs, whether it be either of the SNIACs groups or the SILCs, in terms of conversation around the shoreline guidance document. So all the historical archaeological artifacts seem to have been related to Naha information that they had gathered. So that was a concern that I heard from council at the time when we had this discussion. So I think that's also something to be keeping in mind when we look at this donation. City Manager.
I just wanted to clarify, Councillor Page, do you know how this is funded through the RD?
It's 10,000.
But
And
are
where is
we
it
already
coming
paying for
from?
part of it?
I have that answer.
No.
So I reached out to, unless you do too, but I reached out to the Yev Maloff over there and asked him. So it comes out of S105, Community Sustainability, and so Nelson doesn't pay.
Yeah, we are not CSLAC.
See, again, it goes back to when you look at the partnerships, you've got the regional government, you've got the Tanahan Nation Council, the Columbia Intertribunal Fishery Commission, the Ministry of Forests, the Natural Resources, Ministry of Transportation, Infrastructure. Some of these have adjusted their name in Interior Health and the City of Nelson. But again, it's a place where, well, you don't have the village of Castle, you don't have the town of Creston, Castlegar, as much as anything else is connected to the water that ends up on that side. And I question that principle of like, if this is funding, where are those other partners? Because it seems to be we have inherited a collection, and then the elephant in the room, of course, is because this partnership was formed around these partners. We have partners now and conversations to be had with the province, or the province to be having about these kinds of partnerships. Is there going to be another associated, another adjacent organization that will capture other partners? Will this partnership get adjusted? Will we be bringing cities into this, or just keep it as the regional district? I think there's more questions this kind of ask brings forward. For me, on a long-term sustainability standpoint, I am comfortable spending $2,000 and directing them towards the ready grants in the future. But I think in this is starting to uncover things. We probably need to have a more foundational conversation as a partnership about why is it structured this way? And is this the way? Do we need to be at that table? And if so, do others need to be at that table? Because I don't think the way it is now makes much sense from what I've seen. But, it's just, yeah.
So council, we have before us a recommendation that's been moved and, did I get that far?
Yeah. And second.
Sorry, I just want to make sure everybody got it. Moved and seconded. And so seeing no further questions.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
So the website says that the City of Nelson is already a partner. That's what I'm trying to understand. So we all are already funding this group? I forget.
No. So the answer is that the $10,000 from the regional district of Central Kootenay comes from a committee that they have there called
S105.
S105, that we do not, as the City of Nelson, participate in.
No. But we're represented in the partnership.
Sure.
Because we were here when it was formed.
Well, and our staff attend. That was our in-kind contribution. So that's how we participate. Presently, our planning staff do attend and work with the group.
That's got to be worse than in kind. That's different than what the RD is putting forward, because the RD is putting forward electeds.
Sorry, I do
Yes,
have another
further?
question. Do we, historically, do we contribute to coordinator wages type thing? Like, is that operational?
Oh,
I'm curious.
I mean, we can look at things. I mean, oftentimes with the Ready Grant process, we
Yeah.
try to look at like projects as opposed to say funding, because the problem anytime that you give for operational funding is that when we're not giving the next time, then who's picking up the cost of paying a salary or doing operations? That's just a global risk when you look at, I think, giving money. So it's not to this organization, but it's that concept of, what are you giving the money for? I know that when I look at the Ready Grant applications, everybody has their own personal take on it. I tend to look at projects versus funding, because we all know what the problem is when a program doesn't get core funding. We see it regularly. We see it all the time in healthcare. Is that you get a good program, it gets going, it's all been on grants or goodwill, and then something happens and then there's no longer a program. So core funding is important to be contemplating, to have long-term success of an organization. Councillor Tate, any further questions?
Thank you.
Okay, so we have before us this recommendation. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And those opposed? And that carries. So if we can make sure that when we send this money, that we send a letter to say that in the future that they should be looking at ready grants and other opportunities. Okay, perfect. So we have no delegations, and so that moves us on to bylaw 12A, the Parks Amendment bylaw. Staff are recommending an amendment to the Parks bylaw in order to address camping in city parks and other city-owned green spaces. The bylaw changes seek to balance the constitutional right for individuals to take shelter at night with the broader community interest in ensuring that such camping is done in an appropriate and non-disruptive manner. Council is now requested to adopt Parks Amendment bylaw number 3607. So councillors, we had last month a fulsome discussion of this. You can see the summary in our background notes, and we have a recommendation before us. Is there a mover? Councillor Lockenberg, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Okay, Councillor Lockenberg, have you got it handy there?
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson Parks Amendment Bylaw number 3607, 2024 be finally adopted.
Thank you. Councillors, any further discussion on this? Councillor Page.
I wouldn't suggest we not go through adoption today, but I have the question around the dog walk specifically, having last time we went through second and third, that came up afterwards as a very sensitive point for the community, and how appropriate that would necessarily be as one of the areas that's cordoned off, or a portion of that area that's said not to be for camping down by the water there. I don't know if we've looked at that or considered that, just because of the impacts on the dogs and the animals and everything running around down there. And I heard a lot from the community that people are really protective of the dog park, of the dog walk.
Thank you,
I'm
Councillor
super scared about adding things to that list.
Page. Councillor Lockenberg.
I guess I'll just explain why I'm in support of this with like a lot of like caution. And I think as a general principle, I completely agree with the human rights component, that every person has a right to shelter overnight. Of course they do. And the further principle that it's enforceable, or there's a municipality's responsibility to ensure that there's a place for people to go is an important part of this. Like if you don't have a place to go, then you should be able to camp. And so I'd be very cautious if there were not places to camp. And there's fairly ample camping in and around the city. Like we do live in the interface of a whole bunch of nature. And so the challenge really is just about proximity to downtown and proximity to services. So, you could camp at the city boundaries without much trouble and then come in. But we are asking people, so it's, in that sense, it's not really human rights per se. It's just then when you consider the physical challenges of navigating up and down the hill or getting in and out to the city boundaries and then back into the city, where a person is looking for companionship and community and all the rest of it. So all of that has to be considered. And we do have places to camp in the city, in and around the city, that is not a park. And the big challenge I think that the public has, many of them who I've talked to, really centers around two things. The first is that if the campers were able to pick up their stuff and or even neatly organize it, then there'd be a lot more public will or social license for camping. The challenge is really around the needles and the garbage and children and dogs and animals getting, stepping on needles and it has happened. It's not hyperbole. I know, and I've talked to people, and seems like everybody's got a story or two about it. And so what we're trying to do is establish some guidelines to say, children are not responsible in general. They're going to go around they'll pick a needle up or they'll step on a needle without paying attention. And so there has to be some guidance around that. And I think, and in general too, if you did camp in a park overnight and you cleaned up after yourself and moved on, I don't think you would, we probably just would look the other way. It's not meant to be heavy and to criminalize homelessness. It's just to provide reasonable guidelines so that in part, the community doesn't just turn against and continue to turn against our homeless community, which is, I have seen happen. People who have been supportive of a lot of our social people who are struggling with housing, they've turned against because of experiences they've had. And it seems like over and over again, it is about either some criminality, which unfortunately is probably just a few people. It's certainly not the broader community, or it's the garbage. And so it's not perfect. I understand that, but I think it at least helps us kind of walk a middle road here to make sure that the community understands that we're trying to find a way that respects and understands the challenges that our homeless community faces and the needs of people in those neighborhoods who are dealing with some of the effects. It's a tough one, but I think this does kind of draw a line the middle and respecting both sides. So that's all I got to say.
Councilor Pinero.
So just a couple observations and then an actual question, maybe. But I'm not comfortable with this bylaw for a few reasons. One of them being the people that are camping, for the most part, don't have a choice. They don't have another option. That's what they're doing. And so I know from experience coaching people, it's if you have to ask people to do things that they're capable of doing, or you lose your authority and cause a giant headache for yourself and others. most of these people are not capable of finding a different way of living. So they're gonna camp. They're gonna camp somewhere, whether it's at the dog park because that was left off of the list, or whether it's just in one of the parks that's on the list, and then we have to find them and move them and all of these things. And I know there's sort of these built-in, the intention might not be to sort of weaponize that, but I think again the community by and large probably isn't capable of packing up their stuff by 9 a.m. sharp and keeping it in a Tupperware box in a small section neatly. Like that, I think it's unrealistic. And so again, it's not a perfect solution or anything to not do this, but I feel like we're setting ourselves up for just a giant headache because we're asking people to do things that they're clearly not going to do. And then what's the next move? You can't, we also have, so we're confiscating people's stuff. These people live out of their packs, like they need that stuff. It's not a optional thing for them. This is people that don't have another option, I guess, is the sort of definition of most of the people that we're talking about. And so taking away, just because we make a bylaw against homelessness, basically it doesn't mean that homelessness goes anywhere. We're not dealing with any of the causes, we're just legislating it out of existence. And I don't think that actually works. It's not gonna work. There's an encampment in front of the Farmer Supply now. Like, it's just not here. And I've talked to many people, from the police to the first responders to the pharmacists to everybody, and like there's advantages in knowing where the encampment is and knowing where people are. It's a lot safer for them in a lot of ways because those services can get to those people and they don't have to search around in the bushes to find the people that are overdosing. As well as I've recently got an email about some like really heartbreaking safety issues that I think come from having encampments hidden in the back of nowhere, and again, encampments don't seem to be going anywhere because the problems that make these encampments aren't going anywhere. So this bylaw to me doesn't address that. I think it maybe is like, it's a bit of a show. It's a show that we're doing something, but I don't think it actually will do anything. And so I think we should just skip that part and get to something that actually might help. And whether that's designating a place, like during COVID, there was a place, and it definitely cost us money, for sure. I wonder how much a human rights lawsuit will cost us, because according to the legal opinion that we've been provided with, it's contrary to human rights law to make this bylaw. Like, the bylaw itself is illegal according to them. So anyway, those are my concerns. I think I struggle with asking people to do things that they're not capable of doing. I think that the outcome of that is preordained. And I guess my question to maybe Kevin would be, do we have just on a pragmatic level, do we have another legal opinion that says this is okay? Like, to contrast the one from Pivot Legal?
Yeah.
Yeah, we worked with our lawyer, I guess, the city's lawyer, to provide an opinion, and he's worked with several communities that have a no camping bylaw or have something added to their parks bylaw. So yes, we did get a second opinion or an alternative opinion before we even heard from Pivot at all. I do want to respond to some of the comments that you just made. I know that it doesn't solve the problem, but it does give us a mechanism to work with people and to get to know them and to exchange names and to then try and work with other groups to coordinate some kind of services for them. So it's not perfect and it's not bulletproof, but it is sort of a way that we can actually start a conversation. And I think one of the things that you have to remember, or that is really important for us to remember, is that it's all complaint-based. So it can't be weaponized. If there's a complaint and a bylaw officer goes because of the complaint and looks at a certain area, they're not going to just chuck it in the garbage, someone's stuff. Like, I think we included in this package the 2 notices that go. First time is a conversation with the person. Bylaw have had that happen a couple of times where they've waited around, then they've approached the person, talked to the person. Then it's the second step is to put the first notice, and then the third step is with a considerable number of days and a lot of time. So it would be very rare for us to just dispose of something or to just move someone along with no reason.
Can I have a follow-up?
Sure.
So just with what you said, and I do remember those steps, and I understand the intent behind it. I wonder if we need a bylaw to engage with people. I think we could do that without a bylaw, potentially, and also it's complaint driven, and I think that maybe most of the people that would complain, or I don't know, most of them, I wouldn't want to say that. Some of the people that complain are not going to be well versed in human rights law, and the human rights of the people they're complaining about may not be at the top of their consciousness. There's a lot of people that are very fed up with the homeless people in this community, or with the garbage, or with the needles, or with there's a good section of the community that are sort of they're irate about it. And so their consideration for things like whether they're impeding somebody's human right to a place to stay, maybe that's not the first thing they're thinking of. So we might be getting a lot of complaints because we have a bylaw and because they think there's something we can do about it, where in actual fact that might not be true. And so the dissonance between what people think we're capable of and what we actually are capable of, I don't know that bylaw helps that gap. It might, I can sort of see a situation where it would be actually widening that gap a little bit, because there's this perceived ability to move people, and it might not be reality, So that in that way, we're not serving the complaining people, and we're not serving the people that are in the situation to begin with either, in some way. We're kind of missing both boats. I mean, at least potentially. I don't have a crystal ball or anything.
Well, none of us do.
Yeah.
And I think, I think what it does is highlights who's in need, who really needs some help and who really needs to be addressed. And it gives us, our staff, an opportunity to go and say, hey, what can we do? Can we help you out? What do you need? Can we connect some dots for you? Can we assist with that? I think we get painted with this brush where we're out to be punitive all the time, and we're not. And our bylaw officers are working really hard on the education part of things. And this bylaw opens a door for that, for some dialogue.
Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Tate.
Yeah, I just wanted, the current bylaw actually says no camping allowed at all. So we can't even have that bylaw in place after that 2018 Supreme Court ruling, right? So I agree with you that folks who are complainants are this isn't going to serve them, but the current bylaw isn't serving them either. And we get emails about that all the time. Don't you enforce your bylaws? Don't you know such and such? And of course we do. So I think that in some ways it's important, and I'm learning, but with governance, it's just so slow to kind of like move an inch this way and move an inch that way and try to capture a broad understanding of how to serve the whole community in a bylaw. Like, it's really difficult. So the current bylaw isn't doing that anyway. And I agree that it can appear that this gives more ammunition to those folks who are like, hey, can't you enforce your bylaws? But I think that also gives us this opportunity to talk to those people and explain, you know, we need to capture a broad idea of what our community looks like. And it's not always shiny. Not every part of Nelson is shiny. But I think for the most part, and I know you are having probably more friction with folks, but people are really caring and they're getting a little worn out in some places as well. So it's this process of moving our little municipal bylaws, waiting for the province to make some motion as well, hoping to get funding for our service providers, and building those bridges with the folks that are stressed and complaining and the folks that are living it too. It's not perfect, but I do think we need to make adjustments anyway, and this is a good place to start.
Councillors, any further comments? Seeing none, we have a recommendation in front of us. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Okay, and that passes.
No, okay, this is where I missed my chance the last time, and it was
And all those opposed?
opposed, and please
And please
record
record.
it. It was reported as unanimously passed in the newspaper after the last one, and I did not vote in favor that time, so I want to make sure that I am recorded this time as
Okay,
opposed.
opposed.
Thank you.
And do you wish to be recorded as opposed?
Yes, please.
Okay. So motion passes, and Councillor Pinero and Councillor Payne are in opposition, and please record. Thank you. Okay, moving on to, gosh, where am I at now? Reports of some sort.
Minutes.
Minutes, sorry. Somebody's got to teach me how to keep the computer so it stays on longer than 5 minutes.
I'll move this, Mayor.
Okay. And so it's the NAEDP Advisory Committee minutes from May the 1st, received for information. Any comments, concerns? Seeing none. Oh, sorry, seconded by Councillor Tate. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Okay. And then our next one is the reports. And so we have reports from Finance, Accounts Payable, Finance Purchase Reports, and Development Services Building Permit Statistics, all for receipt for information. Does anyone want to pull any one of those out in isolation? Councillor Payne.
I didn't want to pull it out. I just wanted to say I missed the pulling out the big amounts and putting them at the front. So I just want to say how great that was when you guys were able to do that. It may have been a time constraint, but just giving some positive encouragement of that was really useful for me to look through that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's at the bottom of this.
It's above the purchasing report.
Okay. Okay, you're really trying to make me.
Old dog.
And I had jumped to the purchasing reporting because I found that really exciting. And I know a lot of that you've gone over already, but yeah, what an incredible list of purchasing that the city is working on in the first quarter. And there were a couple of things there, but I think we've already talked about those. But I also do think it's important to talk a little bit about the number of building permits that are, it just gives us an understanding of what's happening in the city as far as, and again, I refer back to the recent provincial legislation where we could put 4 units on every city lot, and I do know a lot of residents reached out and were very concerned about that, and we can see from this report that that does not seem to be happening. So I think we're still in a good place of understanding our community and maintaining the character and heritage as we develop and grow and welcome new people to the community. So I just think it's important for people to know that those reports are there. If you don't get all the way down through the report, like I didn't with the financials, to take a look at that one and just see where we're at with our building statistics. That's it.
Okay, so then items 1, 2, and 3 have been moved for receipt for information, moved by Councillor Payne, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor of receiving the reports for information, and that carries. Thank you, councillors. And here we are, notice of motion, we don't have any, no late items. So number 17, resolution closing the meeting to the public. It is the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of council and staff and any approved audiences be excluded from this meeting. At the meeting of council, continue under section 90, 1C and I, regarding labor relations or other employee relations and the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of lands or improvements respectively. And yes, I need a mover. Moved by Councillor Lockenberg, seconded by Councillor Tate. All those in favor, and that carries. I'd like to thank everyone in the audience for coming tonight. A few of you are to remain.